include the opportunity to comment on those matters, which comments from the public will be received. With that, I'll call the meeting to order. And let's establish a quorum. Could we have a roll call?
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. Mr. Moore,
Present.
Mr. Missile,
Here.
Ms. Firehawk,
Here.
Mr. Carazana,
Here.
Mr. Bivens,
Yeah.
Mr. Claiborne.
Oh, present. Didn't sound like Claiborne. I'm sorry.
And Mr. Murray here.
I did say Mr. Murray, y'all didn't hear me?
Yeah, I didn't hear you.
Oh,
So-
I'm sorry, yeah, Mr. Murray, I'm sorry.
Here.
Well, thank you for that, Madam Clerk. And it's my understanding you'd like to share a few words as well.
We see you all and I hope to be back in person in a couple of months.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna have some food for you then.
Good.
No, that's so good to hear, and we can't wait to see you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda are other matters not listed on the agenda from the public. Would anybody like to address the commission under that line item? Okay, I see one hand raised. Want to come forth, sir? If you could share your name and general location of your residence.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening. My name is Tom Olivier from the Samuel Miller District. I've come this evening to comment on the importance of addressing limits in the comprehensive plan update. The basics are simple. The earth is finite. Being mammals, we require biological and physical inputs for our sustenance. Hence, limits exist to our presence on earth. In recent centuries, technological advances have allowed us to expand our presence. Of course, technology hasn't erased earthly limits. It has simply allowed us to claim more of the planetary pie. In 1972, the Club of Rome published a report titled The Limits to Growth. The reports presented findings of a model of the world built by scientists using system dynamics and computer simulations. The model explored interactions of population, natural resources, industrial and agricultural production, and pollution. The modeling showed that, guess what, growth cannot continue indefinitely, and if we do not change our ways, ecological crises and a collapse of societies, likely in the 21st century, would take place. The report warned 50 years ago, entirely new approaches are required to redirect society toward goals of equilibrium rather than growth. The limits of growth has stood the test of time. Indeed, global computer models drawn on in reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change make clear that we now have scant time left to reduce our impacts on the planet and to restore our planet's ecosystems. As someone who trained and worked as a life scientist, I'm perplexed and dismayed by the lack of acknowledgement in the comprehensive plan update of the extent of ecological crises now, the need to protect natural systems, and the need to live within ecological limits. For example, at your work session last week, why weren't there toolkits for natural resource conservation and climate action? Are we still so mired in magical thinking about the feasibility of endless growth that we are unwilling to face the limits of growth and address ecological crises in this comprehensive plan? Thank you.
Right, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the consent agenda. And I do have one question for staff. I just noticed this. The agenda that I have here had item B removed, which was the VA 2023 quadruple 03 3676 Twin Creek Road. And on the hard copy in front of me, it's not there. Just wanted to make sure that the consent agenda we act on is the one online. I just noticed that.
Yeah, apologies. It looks like the printed version is not our online version.
Okay.
But my understanding is that these copies are only the ones that are available right here in this room. The version that's online is what
That's the one.
does include it. Yes.
Okay, so online is the way it should go. Okay,
Correct.
okay, got it. Okay, so before you, you'll have two sets of or three sets of documents, two of which are meeting minutes, July 11th and July 25th. And then item B, Twin Creek Road. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk,
Yes.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, next on the list, we'll move into our public hearings, which we have three tonight. The first one is ZTA 2023 quadruple 05 countywide certificate of appropriateness. And with that, I will turn it over to staff for the report.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Margaret Malashewski. I'm one of the managers in the Planning Division of Community Development. I don't get to present to you very often. I spend most of my time with the Architectural Review Board, working with entrance quarters. And tonight I am going to present to you an entrance quarter related zoning text amendment. I'm going to start with a little bit of background on the entrance corridors. Some of you may not be familiar with them, and I'll just try to give you a little context for tonight's request. The entrance corridors were first established in Albemarle County in 1990. Entrance corridors are streets that run to or through the historic areas of the county and the city, and they were established to help ensure that the character of new development is consistent with the historic character of the county. And that's done by establishing an architectural review board that applies design guidelines to the review of new development in the corridors. Any development that falls within the entrance corridor overlay and that requires a site plan or a site plan amendment or a building permit requires approval from the ARB, and we call that approval a certificate of appropriateness. When the entrance corridors were first established, and for many years thereafter, every application that fell into those categories was presented to the ARB in an ARB meeting. In 2009, we took steps to streamline that process. And in 2010, the Board of Supervisors approved a ZTA that established a new class of certificate of appropriateness, and that's called a countywide certificate of appropriateness. The process was streamlined by making 11 types of development available for staff level entrance corridor review. Those 11 categories are types of development that are relatively small in scope or that are expected to have lesser visual impact on the entrance corridor streets. And those are the 11 categories that you see listed on that slide. For each category of countywide certificate, the ordinance requires that the ARB first establish design criteria that will be used for the review of the subsequent countywide applications. So the ARB establishes the design criteria, and then staff review individual proposals against those criteria. In 2021, a 12th category was added to the list, and that was done as part of the ZTA to establish the RIO 29 form-based code. So that streamlined staff level review is available for form-based code development proposals that also fall within the entrance corridor overlay. Tonight's proposal is to add another category to the list of countywide certificates. This one would be for sites that are subject to public-private partnership agreements that have been executed by the county. Adoption of the ZTA would allow for streamlined entrance corridor review of any development subject to such an agreement. You'll see in your staff report that the ZTA proposal has been reviewed for all the typical factors that the board wants to be considered for a ZTA. And in most cases, the addition of this category of countywide certificate has no direct impact on those factors. Instead, those factors would have been already evaluated at the time the board considered establishing the partnership. So what's before you tonight is a request to make a recommendation on the addition of that one line of text that's highlighted on that slide, adding that to the entrance quarter overlay section of the code to allow for more efficient review of development proposals on properties that are subject to public-private partnership agreements that have been executed by the county. That is all of my presentation. I have motions when you're ready for them, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you have.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Firehawk.
I think I understand this, but I just want to say it out loud to make sure I do. This is not giving a blank check for the use at a particular location. This is simply for the design criteria that would apply to that already approved use in whatever that location is.
That's right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just one,
Sure.
one comment, a question. I guess I'll start with the question, just to be sure, if staff determines that there's a need to bring it to the ARB, you can still do that, right, as part of this process?
That's right.
And then just a comment as being part of the ARB, I've found these certificates or the countywide certificates of appropriateness, difficult to say, but they're actually very helpful in terms of streamlining the process. So I would definitely support this.
Any other questions? All right, well, with that, I will open the public hearing. Has anyone signed up from the public to speak? Okay. Madam Clerk, is there anyone online who has raised their hand to speak?
No, sir, there isn't.
All right, well, with that, I will close the public hearing. Okay. Any further deliberations before you're prepared to make a motion? Oh, all right, is anyone prepared to make a motion?
I'm happy to make a motion.
All right.
I move to recommend approval of ZTA 2023-0005, countywide certificate of appropriateness.
There's a second?
Second,
All right, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Bivens? Mr. Bivens?
Aye.
Mr. Carazana?
Aye.
Mr. Missile?
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne?
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Mr. Murray?
aye.
Thank you.
All right. Madam Clerk, I think something just happened to your volume while you were calling the roll. It was good and then it kind of faded down a little bit.
Okay.
That sounds good there.
Thank you.
All right. Moving to the next item on the docket here is SP 2023-0003 Mill Creek Lot 11, Independent Office 1 Industrial. So with that, I'll turn it over to staff for their report.
Good evening, supervisors. My name is Andy Wartelock, and I'm a senior
Commissioner.
planner. Commissioner.
Just for a second there.
Good evening, commissioners. Sorry about that. My name is Andy Wartelock, and I am a senior planner with the Albemarle County Planning Division. Tonight, you have before you a request for a special use permit, special use SP 2023-0003, known as Mill Creek Lot 11. To provide some context on the location of this property, it is located in the industrial section of the Mill Creek Planned Unit Development off of Stony Ridge Road, and I've highlighted the subject parcel. for this application. You can see Southern Parkway going east-west across the bottom of the screen, and then Avon Street going diagonally from the southwest to the northeast up to I-64, which is on the very top right portion of the screen. This slide shows a zoomed in aerial of the property with Stony Ridge Road on the west side of the property. And then the parcel also has frontage on Five Springs Road, which is on the east side of the property. And this slide just shows some of the nearby businesses, an auto paint supply shop, a tree service business, a dental office in the office building down at the bottom of the screen, and then a dog daycare to the southwest of the subject parcel. So this property is known as TMP 76M1-11. It is approximately 1.35 acres in size. As I mentioned, it has frontage on two roads, Stony Ridge and Five Springs. The zoning is PUD, Planned Unit Development, and that is the Mill Creek PUD, and it is in the designated industrial section. The parcel also has some managed steep slopes in it. It is also in the Airport Impact Area Overlay District. And I just wanted to point out that this is the last undeveloped parcel in the industrial section of the Mill Creek PUD. And in the Southern and Western Urban Neighborhoods Master Plan, the property is designated for industrial uses. This slide just shows the zoning of the site, PUD, which is the teal aqua color. There is one large parcel to the west zoned light industry, and then there are some residential properties farther to the east. And then the residential section of the Mill Creek PUD is south on the south side of Southern Parkway. You can kind of see the edge of that in the bottom center of the screen. And this slide just shows additional context, this time for the Southern and Western Urban Neighborhoods Master Plan, showing that the subject parcel and all of the surrounding properties are all designated for industrial uses. And then some of the more peripheral uses include institutional, where the armory and jail are located, urban density residential, which is the lakeside apartment complex, and then neighborhood density residential, which are some of the homes in Mill Creek. So looking at the specifics of this request, this special use permit application is a request for a special use permit to allow the construction of an independent office within a structure that was not established or vested until after April the 3rd, 2014. So of course, since this parcel is undeveloped currently, there is no building that was established or vested before that date. And so I provided some definitions as well so that you can understand what an independent office is, especially since this property is in a area designated for industrial use. And so an independent office is an office that is located within an industrial district that is not an industrial office. And an industrial office is defined as an office that is owned and operated by the same business entity engaged in this list of industrial uses that are located in either the county or it can be in the city of Charlottesville, where the office provides services to the industrial use, but which need not be on the same site as the industrial use. So essentially, an independent office is an office for any type of commercial use that is not related in any way to a designated industrial use in the county's comprehensive plan. So what the applicant is requesting is to, they're looking to put a building on this parcel. And so they're looking at having a by right warehouse use on the lower level of the building. And that would be approximately 8,300 square feet. And the warehouse use would be accessed from the west side of the property off of Stony Ridge Road. And then the special use permit is really for the upper level of the building. And that is where the applicant proposes to put this independent office use, and it would not be associated with the warehouse down on the lower level. And so the independent office use is for 8,900 square feet. And as I said, that's on the upper level, and it would be accessed from the east side of the property from Five Springs Road. So this is just a slide showing the concept plan and the proposed building with the driveway on the west on Stony Ridge Road. That would be the way that the owner accesses the warehouse use. And then on the east side from Five Springs Road, where that entrance in the parking lot is, that would serve the independent office use on the upper level. And this slide also shows just a screenshot from the concept plan that the applicant provided, showing the elevation of the building and how, because of the slope of the land and the way the building is built into that slope, why the warehouse use is accessed from the lower level off of Stony Ridge Road and the independent office use on the upper level from Five Springs Road. So looking at factors for consideration, staff did its analysis and is further described in the staff report. There were several positive aspects of the independent office use proposal. The proposed use will continue to provide a mixture of uses in the area, which is something that a planned unit development promotes. The proposed use does not prevent by right industrial uses from also operating on the site. Of course, the applicant does intend to provide that by right warehouse use on the lower level. And even though the proposed office use is for an independent office, that would not prevent the property owner from some point in the future, perhaps renovating that office use for some other use, including an office use that does serve an approved industrial use. And there are no adverse impacts expected to nearby or adjacent properties. And there were no concerns identified with this request. So staff does recommend approval of special use permit SP 2023-3 Mill Creek Lot 11 with the following two conditions. One is the standard condition that we often put on special use permits, that the development must be in general accord with the concept plan provided, especially the following essential major elements, including the proposed building, the parking and loading areas, and the sidewalk. The sidewalk connects the two sides of the building, the warehouse use and the proposed independent office use. And of course, minor modifications to the plan would be permitted as long as they don't conflict with the elements, the listed elements, to ensure compliance with the zoning ordinance. And then the independent office use must not exceed 9,000 square feet of space in the proposed building. Since the applicant was requesting the 8,900 square feet, we decided to round it up to 9,000 to allow some flexibility at the site planning stage and as they built out the building. So then I also wanted to provide some updates on this application. Since the staff report was published, the applicant has indicated an interest in increasing the maximum square footage of this independent office use from the 8,900 square feet that was identified in the project narrative and the concept plan in the staff report to 11,000 square feet. So that would be an increase of about 2,100 square feet. And my understanding is that the applicant does intend to discuss this proposal in their presentation. However, I just wanted to let you all know that staff have not had an opportunity at this time to review any sort of revised plans based on this new proposal. And thus, staff cannot provide a full analysis of this proposed change, increasing the independent office use by 2,100 square feet. So staff's analysis and recommendation in this presentation this evening remains based on that original request for the 8,900 square feet of independent office space. And that's all I have for this evening. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
All right, thank you for a great report. Commissioners, I'll start with Commissioner Moore. Do you have any questions for the staff?
Not particularly, no.
Okay.
It seems relatively straightforward compared to some of we get.
All right, Commissioner Murray.
Nope.
I'll wait for the applicant.
Commissioner Missile.
I don't know when to ask this question, but I'll ask it now. So with the change in square footage requested, just to clarify, there was a CAC meeting, there was a public input opportunity. There isn't a public input opportunity for the new 11,000 square foot number. Does this act as that public input opportunity, or how do we communicate this to the neighbors, community there?
I guess my understanding is this would be the public input opportunity. I don't know, Kevin, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, if the commission wanted to move forward with this, there wouldn't be any additional opportunities for the public to comment until it goes to the board, of course. And at that point, if the commission were to recommend the approval of the additional square footage, then that would be that would be part of the staff report when it goes to the board. So that would really be the only opportunity for any neighbors or the CAC to make comment on that.
Great, thank you. I noticed that there were no I mean, I was at the CAC meeting, there were no comments, so that's fine. But
I
just
have not
wanted to check.
received any comments from
No
neighbors
other
on
ones?
this proposal.
Great, okay, thank you. That was it.
Commissioner Curzona?
So Chair, I would just offer that an attempt to sort of say, this is in fact, if in fact a music studio and a recording operation goes in there, that in fact is not out of sync with manufacturing, storage and distribution. Because the work of that is, while it's electronic, it is still making something. And assuming that it gets recorded, it is still going to get recorded and it's going to be distributed. So I am not of the mind that this is out of sync with what's there, when in fact, this is just a different way of working in an industrial space. So I would kindly ask staff or well, you don't have to, I'm saying it now. I disagree with that this is out of sync and think that this in fact is an appropriate use for that space, given it's just simply a different mode of manufacturing.
Thank you.
If I may add, though, my understanding from the CAC meeting we had was it was the office space part that they were saying was not what was it allowed.
Yes, so the office space is the part that requires the special use permit. And it was determined by the zoning division that a music recording and operations studio it would fall under that independent office.
So maybe we need to
designation.
fix our zoning definitions at some point too. Sounds like, anyway.
All right. All right. So with that, I will open the public hearing. And I'll call for the applicants.
Good
Hey,
evening,
good
Chair.
evening.
Oh, sorry.
I was saying good evening.
Oh, good evening. Oh, sorry. I thought you were, thought I was a little premature in speaking up. So anyway, good evening, Chair Claiborne, members of the commission. My name is Kelsey Schlein. I'm a planner with Shimp Engineering. And I'm here tonight representing Emmanuel Zunz, who's the contract purchaser of tax parcel 76 M11, which is the subject of this special use permit request. Also here with me tonight is Dick Abaddon with Artisan Construction. He is also working with the property owner on moving this project forward. Sorry about that. So Emmanuel Zunz is the founder of 1RPM, which is a music marketing company and digital distribution and fan engagement platform. We've arrived at this proposal before you tonight for a request for an independent office within an industrial designated portion of a planned unit development. After a long search for a piece of property for Mr. Zunz to realize his vision, and after quite a bit of investigation into the history of this property in coordination with staff to determine whether an office would be permitted by right in this zoning district. Mr. Zunz had been looking for a warehouse property to garage his vehicles for quite some time. However, when he came across this piece of property, he saw the vision and the opportunity for something more, a space for warehousing, storage, garage space for his vehicles on the first floor, and a space on the upper floors for the operations of his music business, and also just music collaboration, inviting in local artists to work on their craft and to market themselves as local musicians. Next slide here. So the property, as Andy described, is part of what was formerly known as the Forest Hills PUD back when it was originally approved in 1985. This property, being adjacent to the Forest Hill PUD, was then incorporated into what we now know as the Mill Creek PUD in 1995. Since there was no provision in that 1995 zoning or listed permitted uses within the PUD adopted application plan, the by right uses within this district default to the planned development industrial district. And after a ZTA in 2014, independent offices became by special use permit. And so that is largely why we are here before you tonight. So looking at the surrounding context, the Mill Creek PUD industrial area and the adjacent light industrial portion over time since its original adoption has adapted into a mixture of uses, industrial and commercial. I will say the PUD was adopted in this area, was designated as industrial. And after the construction of the builder's first source, I believe it was the FedEx property that developed next. And so those large parcels where the topography was able to be managed to serve those larger industrial uses did come online first, and they did develop and kind of serve that intent of the industrial designated portion of the PUD. Over time, and especially for the properties like this one that are in between Stony Ridge Road and Five Springs Road, the topography is much more extreme. And so I think you'll see that over time, as we've called out here, a lot of those users in that area have developed as a preschool, doggy daycare, medical offices, and several of the uses within the PUD have been subject to prior special use permits and zoning map amendments. Looking at the surrounding context here, so kind of right at the end across from Saba Knife is the property. We're looking from Five Springs Road, and just calling out some additional context of the South Side offices, a building that's 2-story above grade and built into the hillside. So it's 3 stories from the rear and 2 stories from the front. So I have some building renderings to share with you tonight as well of what we're proposing, but wanted to call attention to the existing context of the site and what surrounds this area. So here we're looking from Five Springs Road. The trees towards the front is the property that we're looking at. And we're just calling attention to, with the yellow line, just the grade change that is across the property, which I'll go into a little further detail later on with a cross section. And so here you can see that the elevation at one end of the property is approximately 490, and the other end is approximately 454. So quite a relatively significant topographic change across the property. And that's why you see many of the buildings here nestled in between Five Springs Road and Stony Ridge Road have been built into the hillside. A lot of them are 1-story over basement or 2-story over basement. And that is our proposal here before you tonight. So this is the site concept that we have that Andy shared with you all. So access from Stony Ridge Road, that would be for kind of the warehouse garage access. The access from Five Springs Road would be primarily for the music studio use. And Andy briefly mentioned this in his presentation, but one item just after further coordination with the project team and just finalizing some calculations after the staff report was released, and I'll share with you the building concept in a minute where you'll see where we finalize those calculations on the 3rd floor. We would like to request that the commission consider a condition to permit the office space for up to 11,000 square feet as opposed to 9,000 square feet, which is put forward in the staff report. And so here's an explanation of why. So on the ground floor, we have the warehouse office. So right now we're looking from Stony Ridge Road. So this is the warehouse area accessed. And so it's 3 stories from Stony Ridge, 2 stories from the other side. And the office area is on the 2nd floor, a music studio. And on the 3rd floor, there's kind of an additional office space imagined as collaboration space and kind of just a really interesting space for music and artists to gather and collaborate with one another. There is, you can see, a terrace that is up there. And at the time when we originally submitted this, we were just solidifying how much of the area would be enclosed. And so the 11,000 square feet just provides us with enough flexibility at site plan and building permitting where we can enclose some additional area up on that 3rd floor. And so I wanted to present you with that rendering so that you can understand where the additional 2,000 square feet and our request is coming from. As far as the footprint that we presented in our concept plan, that remains the same. It's largely that additional square footage is focused exclusively on the 3rd floor and how much space will be enclosed. Quickly, just looking at some impacts, because I do understand that it's 2,000 additional square feet that we're considering. I think in this area, the impacts will be minimal. And so just kind of calling out from the IT Generation Manual 11th edition, just the difference in peak hour trips. So from 8,900, which was evaluated, to 11,000 square foot, which we would request that you consider tonight. We're looking at an increase of 3 peak hour trips in the morning and 5 peak hour trips in the evening. This is again taken from the Trip Generation Manual. I will say, as far as a music studio use, I don't think the traffic will be quite as high. But just for the purposes of evaluating impacts for the use proposed, I wanted to present this information to you. We are not requesting any increase in height from the by right district. And so just wanted to clarify that with the additional square footage, we will still be within the 65-foot height maximum, well within that. And so just wanted to confirm that item with you all. And then looking here, as Andy mentioned, this is the last undeveloped property within the industrial designated portion of the Mill Creek PUD. And so to the left, I'm calling out the 2013, which was before the ZTA, which required offices by special use permit was adopted, and after. So a lot of the site was already developed, and that's largely what you see today. And that remains the case. I think that these properties that were in between Five Springs Road and Stony Ridge Road were likely the most challenging to develop, given the topographic challenges there. But also those topographic conditions lend themselves much better to smaller buildings and much better to a different type of user than a typical industrial user. So anyway, I just wanted to call I guess attention to the fact that this remains the only undeveloped parcel. And I think that's today probably largely because this type of user is the ideal user from the site, but we have to go through some additional approvals to get to that point. Just the last item that I'll note is that when the board adopted the ZTA back in 2014, and I think a real driver for that, and if in the staff report and in the minutes, was just to looking at some economic development goals of the county to preserve industrial land and to prevent premature conversion or just conversion of industrially zoned properties to commercial. I think in this case, this property likely will never serve that industrial purpose as a whole for a large economic industrial driver. And we really feel that this is a good use and a good proposal and a good use of this land, which is the last undeveloped property in the Mill Creek PUD. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? I'll start to my left. Commissioner Bivens?
I will thank you once again for presenting your illustrations in a way that eyes don't have to strain to read the final notes. Thank you for doing that. I certainly appreciate that. I will also ask you, do you have a Five Springs Road elevation?
Five Springs Road elevation.
With your desired piece? That's the back end, I think. Do you have a front end? Because it's gonna be a different footprint compared to the sort of vanilla box that's next to it. And so I just wanted to have a sense what that's gonna look like.
Yeah, and I could probably bring that up for you, and I could definitely have that answer for you in a response
Later?
period.
Okay.
But it would just take me a second to bring up what
That's fine.
exact that
Okay, so
elevation is.
I'll look forward to that in your response. Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Commissioner Arizona?
I have no question for the applicant.
Commissioner Missile?
Hi, thank you for a great presentation. Just a couple quick questions. One, you mentioned that there's no impact on the building footprint. Are there impacts on, and I know we're not looking at the site plan per se because it's a concept, but are there impacts on the number of parking spaces? So you have to go beyond 10 to add the other 2,000 square feet?
Sure. I mean, so the final parking calculation is definitely going to be, in the final square footage of this building is ultimately going to be a large coordination with staff and designating either the net area or coordinating with them on an exact study of how many people are going to be accessing the site every day.
Got it.
So it's not really creating any additional, the square footage, how we imagine it, isn't creating any additional workspace. It's more
I
creating additional flex collaboration space.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, great. Thanks. And I'm just curious, have you done a study to see if this is visible from the entrance corridor at all? Kind of doubt it, but I just didn't know if that was.
I think the topography is such that it's low enough from Avon Street that it currently isn't in the overlay district.
Got it. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner?
I'm just gonna ask a question, but I'll preface it by saying I'm actually not concerned about the traffic from the site. But I was confused about, I don't know if confused is the right word, just concerned about the trip generation calculation, I understand use IT manual, blah, blah, blah. But it seems like if people are working on recordings and music things, and my family's done a lot of this, people come and they work for 2 or 3 hours and then they go. So wouldn't there be more coming and going than an office use where you theoretically come to work at 9 and leave at 5 kind of thing?
Sure.
So I just didn't know if that was the right calculation.
I think that, and no, thank you for that question. I think that's a good point. So, we look to the IT manual as the standard, and as just before you're requesting office. And so
Right.
evaluating office. As far as the music user, I think that type of user, maybe in a day, I think might be comparable to an office, but I think that the time that people come and go might be a little different. Whereas in the office, everybody comes at once and leaves at once. I think for this type of music user, you would have smaller trips coming and going throughout the day rather than a whole crowd coming and
But there
going.
what do you think? There might be like 15 people in there doing stuff at once or?
I think, that's probably the max in a day
yeah.
of how many people would go to the
Okay.
site in a day.
Okay. All right. And then on the top floor, so some of it was going to be open space, and I understand it's on a slope, so you can't necessarily see it from Avon Street. I'm just trying to get a sense, is there a potential, it's industrial area, but is there a potential for people to be out in the open space part, making noise, laughing? I don't know if there's any concern with an impact from that, because when I saw it at the CIC, I thought it was a 2-story completely enclosed building. This doesn't look like what we saw. And I know we just saw a very basic rendering
The
at that
box, yeah.
time. Yeah, but trying to understand if there will be any impacts from the open air top part.
Sure. I can't imagine that there would be any, impact beyond like a normal office user, people going outside, having lunch, maybe they're playing a little guitar or something outside. I don't know. But I think kind of throughout the day, there is noise from other users. And so although it might be, pleasant to have lunch or something like that outside, it might not be, pleasant to do anything more than that. There's all things possible right there. There's 54 dogs barking outside. There's, it is an industrial.
Participate.
It is, there's various noises that come from the area. So I would say, as far as any noise that would come from this user, it wouldn't be, any more impactful than nearby users, I would say, and very just kind of typical of just having lunch outside, collaborating outside, talking through music.
Okay. And then as a recording studio, if that's what this is, I assume that you'll have adequate soundproofing in the building so that in case somebody's music is not to somebody else's taste, that they won't be hearing that.
Correct. Yeah. Cause it kind of goes, both ways with that of like,
Right.
Maybe you don't want to hear the music, but also the music recording and the quality of the sound, you don't want to hear anything outside as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Murray,
I'm good.
Commissioner Moore?
Don't really have too many questions.
All right, I just do have one question. It was about the warehouse use, and I think you said that the applicant was going to be storing cars there. Is it just garage like storage, or is it automotive like repair or?
No automotive repair. It's really collectible cars. That's the storage for it.
All right, thank you. All right, well, with that, I will ask to see if there's anyone from the public who to speak to this, and then I'll provide some time for your response. Okay, is there anyone signed up to speak? Okay, no one in person. Madam Clerk, is there anyone online that signed up to speak?
No, sir, not at this time.
All right. With that, I'll turn it back over to the applicant. I know they needed a few minutes to look up some information for Commissioner Bivens, and we'll be ready to move forward at that time.
And Chair, if, given that it's not viewable from Avon Street, I would be willing to let the applicant pass on this particular.
You take that pass?
Just wanted to, I do have the answer for you.
If you have the image, I'd love to see the image, but you're usually so very responsive.
I did
I'm gonna
pull-
give you a pass on this.
I mean, I haven't, yeah, I think our front floor elevation, you asked the question, I have to answer.
Yeah, okay.
Our front floor elevation is conceptually at 468, and I think Five Springs were kind of up around 490, I believe.
Okay,
So
you're at
it'll be
468. Okay.
lower
That's what I
than
wanted-
Five
That's
Springs.
what I wanted to see.
Okay.
How much higher of
Mhm.
of that total elevation was the top floor wing? I'm good. Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you. With that, I will close the public hearing. And I'll bring it back in. Is there any other things that we need to discuss regarding this proposal? Okay. Seeing heads nodding, so that means no. We prepared to make a motion?
I am prepared to make a motion.
Right.
If I could have the cheat sheet, that would be helpful. Thank you. And
And I just wanted to comment that these motions are based on the conditions for the 9,000 square feet as originally included in the staff report, not for the 11,000 square feet that
Understood.
the applicant is requesting.
So I would have to essentially amend this to add the agreement to go to 11,000 square feet.
If that's what the commission wishes.
Yeah, I'm assuming that is, but
Nobody said anything different, so yeah.
okay, help, if I don't do this correctly. I move that the planning commission recommend approval of SP 2023-3 Mill Creek Lot 11 with the conditions as recommended by staff in the staff report and the amendment to go to 11,000 square foot maximum as opposed to 9,000 square foot maximum.
That's for the industrial office piece.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Second. All right, any further discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens,
Aye.
Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Ms. Firehawk.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to our final public hearing, SP 2023. Thank you. Quadruple 01 Covenant School Tennis Court. So with that, I'll ask for the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Claiborne. I'm Rebecca Ragsdale, Planning Manager with Community Development, and I'll be presenting this item this evening. Thanks for your patience as I get set up here. And I did just get a new computer, so working out those kinks. So this is, the proposal before you this evening is a special use permit amendment associated with the existing Covenant Upper School located off of Hickory Street in the county. And the proposal is to incorporate a recently acquired parcel into the school's campus. So this map shows you where the existing school campus is outlined in yellow. And then the proposed parcel to be added, which is has frontage on Stagecoach Road. That parcel is about 2.61 acres and the existing campus is about 25.93 acres. So you can see where the entrance, the primary entrance to the site is from Hickory, and there are existing athletic fields with parking to the rear of the primary school academic building. The parcel and parcels to the north are zoned R2 residential, and then nearby we have the Southwood community, and then in white zoned rural area is future Biscuit Run Park, which will also have some access and parking from Hickory Street down to the trails. It is zoned, it is recommended neighborhood density residential in the comprehensive plan. The existing school was approved in 1999, early 2000s. And you see a number of private schools come before you in neighborhood density or urban density designated areas. They are a typical secondary use that the comprehensive plan anticipates, provided that impacts to abutting property owners are addressed. The applicants provided a narrative and a concept plan which shows the intended use of the property, which is on the screen. It is introducing athletic fields closer to nearby residential units, and they will be accessed off of Stagecoach. This is a secondary access. As I mentioned, the primary access for parking and those going to the courts will be from existing parking from the Hickory side of the campus. It is an introduction of 6 tennis courts, about 6 parking spaces, limited to primarily ADA or service vehicles. The applicant has worked to reduce that from the original proposal of 12 spaces to 6. The plan does provide for some buffer and screening along the property line, with the closest dwellings. This special use permit, as I mentioned, was originally approved late 1999, early 2000. It included, as we typically do, a requirement that commercial buffer and screening requirements be met. So that is an area where it is reduced, but the screening will still be provided. The community meeting was held in March, and we have heard from some of those closest neighbors regarding concerns about lighting, noise, traffic. So the applicant has worked to address that in the proposal, and also staff has recommended some additional conditions specific to the tennis courts that are getting closer to the neighbors' properties. Our primary concerns were noise and lighting. The applicant provided a lighting plan, but that wasn't one of the conditions that we had originally introduced. So we have some updates to the recommended special use permit conditions, which are intended to get at those considerations for abutting property owners, impacts and change of character, which we did note as somewhat of a concern since it is getting closer into that neighborhood there. So our standard condition number 1 is that the property would be developed in general accord, must be developed. So that's the update to that condition from your staff report with regard to the location of buildings, parking areas, and athletic facilities, entrances, buffers, and screening. Now, this is an update to the conditions, the older conditions. So these will replace the existing ones, and we've modernized them to our standard language. And as I said in the staff report, limited those that were references to ordinance requirements already or things that have been satisfied. But what we have maintained or modernized is the general accord condition with the plan. They are not proposing any changes to the existing campus or an increase in enrollment. So that would remain at 550 students maximum. The condition for compliance with commercial setbacks and buffers and screening is maintained, but we do, if this concept plan is approved or recommended for approval as is, must make that exception for where it is narrower. And I should have mentioned that that is a minimum of a 20-foot undisturbed buffer with screening is the commercial requirement. So it will be reduced in terms of the buffer, but the screening must be provided. To address some of the concerns about noise and lighting, we had recommended hours of operation condition. Those hours you may be familiar with come from other sections, noise generating activities and other parts of the code. We are learning about other racket sports and the increase in potential noise impacts. So those have been prohibited. In this case, it will be limited to the quieter tennis courts. And we've also, as presented by the applicant, that this would be tennis courts that are primarily an accessory use used for school activities, not open to other tennis organizations. We know we have an active tennis community. They might like to use the courts, but in terms of impacts to those residents, that's why we had introduced those initial 6 conditions. There's been some questions about lighting that we just received. yesterday. We sent those concerns to the applicant. We let them know we were contemplating a seventh condition. In terms of the lighting ordinance, the lighting ordinance requires full cutoff for lighting above 3,000 lumens. So we suggested a condition regardless of lumens that lighting shall be full cutoff. The ordinance and the plan they provided does demonstrate compliance with the ordinance, but in terms of spillover, the ordinance allows a 1/2 foot candle to adjacent properties. So we've recommended that there be no spillover allowed to properties under different ownership. The 2.6 acres hasn't been incorporated with the existing parcel, the school campus, so we've included a provision where that would not apply, that the ordinance allowed spillover could take place. So that is what our updated recommended conditions of approval are, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you for the report. Turn over to the commission and see what the questions we have. So Commissioner Moore?
Kind of curious about condition 6, the one where nobody else can use it except for the school activities. When we have resources like a bunch of tennis courts that are new and nice, it would be nice to, if the owner were up for it, to have those available to other organizations. So I just wanted to hear more about, kind of why that was an important thing to include in the list.
To limit the intensity of activity closer to neighbors.
Yeah.
Just the school's needs.
Commissioner Moore, anything else?
No, I'm also learning more about pickleball and paddle. So thank you.
All right, Commissioner Murray.
I'll save questions for the applicant.
Okay, Commissioner Firehawk.
You know,
Yeah. Commissioner Missile.
Thanks. Ms. Ragsdale, I appreciate it. Just a couple quick questions. One is the maximum enrollment not exceeding the 550 students. I probably should know the answers, but is this amending the existing special use permit that has that requirement on it? And if it isn't, why is it on there?
No, it's, there is a typo in the report where it does say 500 in one place, but it has 550 now, so it's not changing that.
I'm just curious, excuse me, I'm just curious as to why we have to put a limitation on the enrollment in this application. Isn't it covered under another?
This is amending the special use permit
Okay.
condition, so
That
this
was-
will replace the 1999 SP.
Got it. Okay, thank you. The other question you answered, I think 20-foot setback, right, or buffers requirement?
Yes, except
And-
where the exception was noted.
Yeah, and that's 20 feet for parking adjacent, correct? Is that, so they're showing that row of trees?
So it does apply to parking.
Okay. And then the last question, I think, is just around paddle and pickleball. Is there, is the reason that we're limiting because there's a perceived reality, I guess? That's the thing, perceived reality of pickleball balls having a clicking sound that's louder, or is there actually a decibel level measured that causes this to trigger some sort of a limit on the county's tolerance for sound? Seems a little arbitrary to me. I guess.
It's based on recent experience and sound measurements that we've taken at other facilities and
Got it.
complaints from neighbors where the facility started with just tennis and then it's pickleball is a very social sport. And so we have some recent experience with that and that's why that was added as far as.
So it triggered a decibel level
noise.
above the county requirement, or it's just a nuisance?
It's, I think, probably more of the nuisance. I
Okay.
don't recall what the decibel levels are. There have been instances where they have exceeded it and added sound attenuation fencing.
Got it. Okay.
But it's not, I think it kind of goes back to as this was presented, tennis courts that to serve a school use.
Yeah.
We understand it could be an amenity and, but in terms of neighbor impacts, this is why that these additional conditions were
Thank you.
suggested.
I just wondered if it was subjective or objective. Sounds like a bit of both.
Commissioner Missile, I can also tell you based on a quick search of the two. But just measurements of 100 feet from a court, I guess the hard surface of a pickleball is more like 70 decibels, 100 feet away, whereas tennis is more like 40 decibels.
Okay, good to
So-
know. Almost double. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Carazana?
So quick question on, again, on the limitation, so you have the 10 PM to 7 AM, is that assumed throughout the week? So even a weekend activities, or was there any discussion about different hours and weekend activities?
No, that's any day of the week.
Sorry,
That applies to any day of the week.
any day of the week. Thank you.
Always along those lines, when at the CIC meeting, the applicant was repeatedly asked about the need for lighting. And we didn't get a satisfactory answer, so maybe we will when they come up, but they said that most of their matches would end by 5:30. And so it was really unclear why they needed lighting. And so I could imagine a scenario like, let's say it was getting dark and the game was going late and some delay and blah, 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 and it needed to be lit till 6. But I don't see why, given what they said at the CIC, why it would now need to be till 10 PM when they said they would not be having evening matches. So I don't understand that condition. If I was staff, I would have made that say like 6 or 7.
These are, recommended for your discussion. And the narrative did indicate that there would be a need for lighting, and it is proposed on the concept plan in terms of the winter months.
The applicant themselves said in the meeting over and over that they were not going to be playing tennis at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. So I just put that out there. We
Right,
can hear
so
from them.
This is a starting point for discussion.
Sure.
And that staff developed that condition based on kind of a noise lens. And also, we know with conditions of approval, we don't want to be overly restrictive and they have to come back to amend it if they have morning practices before school, or I'm not sure how late practices go. I mean, I think the matches have been the most concerning in terms of traffic and noise impacts, but that was our starting point.
Okay.
All right. And the applicant will be up. We can continue that dialogue there as well. And Commissioner Bivens?
So I guess one of the overarching questions that I have is not about this, but since it's an adjustment to the SUP. I remember at one time when we did the original SUP that there was still going to be a reserve that was going to be held by the school and perhaps by the county to help with the resurfacing or the redevelopment of Hickory Street, and want to make sure that this in no way, in fact, that that's still there, and that this, since I didn't see it mentioned here, doesn't negate that, the fact that the school said that it would agree to hold funds for.
Well, thank you for that question. So Hickory Street has a private maintenance agreement. It's a private road. There's 3 parties to that. It includes the Covenant School for a certain portion. Now Biscuit Run Park, the county is part of that, and Southwood.
And they're all part of, and the agreement is, the agreement's
It's
still in place?
yes.
Okay, that's what I
Mhm.
wanted to know.
It's-
So when you were having conversations with the applicant, was there a conversation about, well, if you've been playing at Tonsler, which has 4 courts, why do you need 2 additional ones? Because it seemed to me that their program, while an emerging program, do you have the time or will you have the need for 2 additional courts when you've been playing in a location? If you've been playing at Tonsler, maybe you've been playing at Penn Park. And perhaps I'm saying this so that the applicant can be prepared to speak to the number of courts that they need there. Because it seems to me that what's one way to mitigate some of the impact on the neighbors. But now I'm going to do the other thing. So this piece of property sits also between the police department at our 5th Street, and was wondering whether or not our police department and the emergency response vehicles that leave there, if they ever leave there under siren. Because if they do, then this is a piece of property that has noise on the west side at all times of night, as opposed to having some noise playing tennis, particularly now that there's a prohibition against pickleball on the other side. And so that's something, those are two different questions there. A, did you talk about the number of courts? And B, did you talk about, are we aware that this, for us to be aware that this is next to the police station where this piece of property is situated? So there's activity already in that area. Okay. The other piece that I just want to sort of say, and perhaps the applicant can speak to this. So I think there's like 4 or 5 different sports activities over there. There's certainly a baseball, softball field, which is probably the same field. There's a football field over there, and I think there's a soccer or the other football type of football field over there. So this is an area where there's a lot of sports going on at all times. And the baseball field, if we look where the baseball diamond is, it is actually right behind a whole bunch of people's houses. I can't speak to, I think the soccer field, other football field, is also behind a bunch of people. So that there's a bunch of stuff over there that's about being school. And so if we could hear something from the applicant about what it's like to be school sports over there and how they engage with their applicants, because while I think I don't have an issue with tennis, in fact, I used to play tennis at one point in my life. I'm wondering why we need 6 courts as opposed to 4 courts. And then my penultimate question for them is, why do we need an entrance off of Stagecoach Road? Why couldn't we have an entrance that's built into the back of the school and give, and in fact, give the people, perhaps have a balloted entrance if there's an emergency to get a kid out of there, if in fact a kid hurts his or herself. But why do we have to have a dedicated entrance off of Stagecoach Road? So I've just tipped my hand.
All right,
I'm not expecting you to answer any of it.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was. Keep going.
I'm not expecting you to answer any of that. That was just me saying, putting
All
my
right.
stuff out there.
Understood. Well, I think with that, we can move to the applicant. So I will open up the public hearing and ask for the applicant to make their presentation.
There we go. Okay.
All right, if you could share your name and who you're with, that'd be great.
Hi, good evening. My name is Eric Woolley. I'm with Woolley Engineering. Happy to be here. I really enjoy the healthy dialogue. We're excited to be here and present the proposed tennis courts for the Covenant School. I'm joined this evening by Frank Berry. He's the CFO and CEO of the Covenant School. We're very appreciative of Rebecca's efforts in getting us to this position. I think she did an excellent job of giving you the basics. We have a lot to talk about. We have a very limited amount of time. So I'm going to give you guys a really brief and quick overview of some of the highlights of how we got to where we are. What are our key design considerations that made this layout the way we're presenting today? But first, I'd like to allow Frank a moment to come up and tell you a little bit about the school.
Thank you so much for allowing us to come. I'm going to be very brief. I just wanted to give you a little overview of the Covenant School. If you're not familiar with us, Covenant School was founded in 1985. We're a pre-K through 12 day school. We have 2 campuses. Our lower school, our elementary school, is at the old McIntyre High School over here on the bypass. That's pre-K through 5. The campus we're talking about now, the Hickory campus, is where we have our middle school and our high school. Total enrollment is 740. The Hickory campus that we were talking about a moment ago, that Rebecca was covering, it has 425 students right now. Just a background on who we are, 40% financial aid. That's really important to us. We want the Covenant School to be accessible to the community. And so that's a core value. Community service is very, very important. You'll see on the next slide, we really emphasize with our students about what kind of life do you want to live and to live well and give back to your community. So that's a core value of what we do. As I mentioned, I kind of hit that already. Kind of our tagline is teaching the next generation to live well. We really emphasize with our students that we need to be good neighbors and be present in our community thus the community service that I mentioned before. As far as the tennis courts, and I'll tee it back up for Eric, the tennis courts for the Covenant School is something that we've been thinking about and dreaming about for about 25 years. It's an important part of our athletic program, and I'll let Eric walk you through that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. All right, here we go. So here's our layout plan. A couple of key little things I'd like to point out, just for orientation. North is up. Got Stagecoach Road along the north. You've already seen some other exhibits that show Hickory Street is along just off the page here, the entrance coming into the school and the existing parking lot. So the school originally had proposed 12 parking spaces. We heard from the CAC meeting a lot of resistance to that people were fearful that that was going to generate a lot of traffic. That's actually welcome news to the school. They didn't really want to put in 12 spaces. 12 spaces was the county mandated minimum. Excuse me, typical minimum. What the school proposes to do is to require all the visiting teams, all the visiting parents, the students that play, the parents, all the visitors to park in the existing parking lot at the school, and then walk up 2 new pathways. This one will be stairs, and this one will be a long, steady, easy walking path up. So the idea is that the parking lot that serves the tennis courts is really just for ADA and anybody else that has difficulty going up, a significant amount of grade change. Also, we wanted to highlight that the light green areas are the existing vegetation that we intend to remain. The dark green areas are the new vegetation that we're proposing. Right here is a small new building that would be served, that would service storage for the tennis facilities and also 2 bathrooms. Interconnecting all these courts, we have ADA accessible pathways, all leading from an ADA accessible parking lot. The site will also be accessed from Stagecoach, but will be gated. So this gate would only allow access to the school and emergency department services. Wanted to briefly show you the grading plan. This is a little bit better than a concept. It's more like a preliminary. But on here, you can recognize these 2-foot contour intervals. As you can see, several of them illustrate the grade change between Stagecoach Road and the Hickory School campus. There's about 30 feet of grade change. So this is a pretty significant drop from this parcel to this. Therefore, this is one of the reasons, one of the main tenets of why we wanted to consider using the existing entry off of Stagecoach, because it allows the ADA accessibility up top. So here's a bird's eye view of what the courts would look like. We have 3 batteries. Each fenced in location would have 2 courts each. So that provides 6 courts. My understanding is that for high school athletics, 6 courts is the ideal amount because it allows 12 matches to occur back to back, which can get the parents in and out before dinner time, which is really key. It's one of the driving considerations, excuse me, for why the school would like 6 courts. We also want to highlight a little bit about the existing parcel. So this is a survey we had done, a topographic survey. You'll see that the existing driveway comes off of Stagecoach. And you can see that it hugs that property line right along. It's just right on the edge. This is the buffer area that we've talked about quite a bit with Mr. Ragsdale and staff. And then it ventures down to the existing residents. Here's a couple of shots of the existing residence. It was a modest 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, slab on grade. It's served by a private well and septic system. And the intention is to demolish this structure and replace the utilities with public utilities through the Covenant Schools parcel. Here's our landscape plan. You can see that the driveway has now been shifted further south, allowing a buffer area. This area is 12 feet wide. That's not 20. And so that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this up. We are proposing magnolia trees along this edge, arborvitaes along this, and along the eastern boundary too. in discussions with this property owner. These green shapes here, as you'll see all along the boundary, those are existing mature trees. So we had our surveyor locate every tree 6 inches in caliper or larger, because one of the core goals when we laid this out was to keep as many of those existing trees as possible. And so you see these trees down the bottom. These are significant oaks. We really wanted to keep these. If we were to push this driveway down even further, we don't think we can keep these trees. So there's some trade-offs. We thought that this would be the more appropriate proposal, but you know. Here's a section view. This is the neighbor to the north. Tennis courts to the south. You can see these magnolias are shown to scale. This is the size of the tree they intend to plant on day one. This is not a growth factor. You can see that the intent is to allow this to grow up over time and hopefully fully screen the neighbors from the activity. So tennis is an untimed sport. So the intention is to have these matches between 3:30 and 6 o'clock, but some of these matches sometimes go long. And there's about a 5-week period on both the end of the fall season and excuse me, the beginning of the spring season, where daylight savings time does provide an opportunity that, you know, some of these matches go right up until the point where it's almost dark. Yeah, we're not going to get to everything. So we just definitely want to make sure that you realize that we're here to answer a lot of questions, because we've covered quite a few things. The USTA recommends 30-foot candles as kind of a minimum. That's difficult to do in a situation like this, where ideally you'd like to have a 40-foot tall light pole. That doesn't really fit with the character. So we looked at, okay, what's the minimum size? So that's 20 feet tall. Given the constrictions, this is about the lowest temperature of lighting that we could apply. So this is to give you an idea of how warm the light is. We tried to stay away from all these blue lights. And here's a rendering of what this would look like. We have no problem keeping the dark sky compliance at the boundary lines.
I can give you a couple of minutes to finish this lighting piece here. I think it's where a lot of the concerns that you probably have heard thus far. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple extra minutes just to kind of walk through this lighting piece.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for allowing us a couple extra minutes. So again, ideally, you'd like to have 35 to 40-foot tall light standards to light a tennis court. And the reason is it provides a consistency of light. When you have a limitation like this one, where we're trying to keep the light poles as low as possible, keep that profile from having glare impacts on the neighbors, you get a situation where you have a larger undulation, where you have peaks and troughs. And so this layout is as efficient as we can get it. If you look at the upper right here, I'm sorry, the upper left. Here's kind of a perspective view that shows you where the light standards would be. And this is as efficient as least amount as possible with a 20-foot tall pole. And we've had some discussions about, okay, what does that do to your lighting? Well, in order to get a minimum of 30, you're going to have some zones that are closer to 50 and even touching 60. Now, we have talked to some consultants that tell us 75-foot candles is kind of ideal for high school. So we didn't feel like this was inappropriate. But the key, what we were looking for, was making sure that we could get this all within this site so that we had no spillover to the neighbors. And so that's why we included also a little rendering of what the light spill should look like from the air.
Thank you. If you could stay there, we'll have some questions for you, I'm sure. So I'll start to my right with Commissioner Moore.
Actually, Go ahead and start with Commissioner Murray. I'll come back.
So in your application, one of the things that mentions that you plan to use nutrient credit trading to address stormwater quality, which you're certainly allowed to do, but just as a suggestion, my understanding from speaking to staff is that you're allowed to not just use that one parcel that you've acquired, but also use your existing school campus as well to treat stormwater. And, you know, you have a lot of areas there where you could put in swales and other ways to treat that. And even if you do purchase nutrient credits, I'd strongly encourage you to make use of the county's ACAP program and VCAP program to come back and do things on the rest of your campus to address the quality of stormwater. It can be a great educational thing for your students. We have a lot of other examples in the county of where stormwater facilities have been, you know, valuable education opportunities for students. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll share a little bit about myself. I actually worked on this project in the late 90s, and we actually developed a site plan for the original parcel. And we did account for future growth. And so there are 3 existing biofilters on the school site. Now, as you know, the stormwater regulations have changed. And even though we have a banking system accounted for in our little bean counting exercise with the older site plans, the new regulations are telling us that the grandfather effect, that those valuable resources that the school did put in the late 90s, early 2000s, we can't actually use them to offset the impact. And that doesn't actually mean that they aren't being used. It just means that we can't use them to justify our calculation. So in a sense, we're getting double. I think the county is getting double credit. The environment's getting double credit. Not only will the system that's already in place treat this stormwater, but the only way really for us to solve the equation is to purchase the credits also. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it was more a statement.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was thinking particularly, I believe if you had the map up, there's a road that went along like south of the tennis courts are going to be. Larger, yeah, so you have, you could very easily put a vegetative swale before that road, like a linear vegetative swale that could catch
This zone
stormwater.
here.
Yeah, right there. You could very easily put a linear vegetative swale if you wanted to. That's the suggestion.
Right. Well, so
Um,
this system would flow from here, which we will have underground storage for water quantity. So we are going to solve quantity on site. Obviously the topography is limited here. This system will outfall into an existing pipe system that goes underneath the baseball, underneath the zone you just referred to, and then off the page. Just beyond these soccer fields is a very large biofilter. And we probably have only used about 40% of its total effect, if you will, with what's on site currently. So that's what I mean by this site will be going through that biofilter.
Okay.
And it will be treated, but we're also going to have to buy credits in order to satisfy the state standards. So,
Thank you for the explanation.
no problem.
Anything else, Commissioner Murray?
Oh, just the other
Sure.
thing is too, I mean, I realize because of your site constraints and the narrow size, why you chose the green giant arborvitae, but it would have been nice if you could have used the native arborvitae instead.
We will discuss that with our landscape architect. Yeah, we'll take that into consideration.
Commissioner Firehawk? Oh, did you have more?
This is maybe less about site plan, but again, one of the things I was thinking about is with the considerable investment that goes into, and also thank you for the presentation and the explanation of the grade being a cause for still needing the ADA entrance off of Stagecoach. No, the thing I mentioned earlier too, just thinking about the considerable investment that goes into this kind of thing, and if there were other tennis organizations or locals in the neighborhood that wanted to use the courts and no sort of use assumption that the school would want to open itself up to that kind of use, but I was just curious if that was a consideration the school was even interested in, or if it was just really just solely for the high school program.
Absolutely, yes. So Frank, if I don't answer this to your satisfaction, please jump up and jump in. So the school has opened it up to the immediate neighbors. That is the condition, and it's actually in the written conditions. This is really, as Ms. Firehook already alluded to earlier, in the CAC meeting, there was a lot of resistance to the opportunity of allowing it open to other people. So there is a comfortability in the school because they're there all the time and they control who's there and they limit the noise, and they can go out there and tell somebody, you're not supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be playing paddleball at 10:01, right? I mean, those are all the things they can control. By opening it up, they do lose some control. And in a residential setting where we have neighbors and we're trying to be considerate, these lights and these, noise considerations, they took them very seriously. And they have no intention of staying beyond the end of practice and matches. And so that's the part where, okay, I hear you. If we'd love to open this up because there's a shortage of tennis courts around, right? But if we do that, then the trade-off could be negative to the people that are actually living next door.
Yeah, I understand the difficulty of turning into like a quasi-public park kind of situation. Yeah. Thanks for the answer.
All right, Commissioner Pyro?
So, yeah, so I'll go back to that question about the time of night. We were all at the CAC meeting. So I'm just trying to understand, you don't need it, doesn't sound like to me, till 10 o'clock at night, even though staff was trying to give you sort of an expansive number. There's no reason to light these courts until 10 at night.
To my
Is that
knowledge,
correct?
no, there is
Right,
not.
so wouldn't something like 7 PM?
I don't think
be
7
acceptable?
PM is enough. If you, okay,
Tell,
so,
tell us what's going on.
all right, so
in the
the
tennis
reason why,
match.
I'm sorry.
Go
So
ahead.
my understanding is the reason why the 6-court layout is the most ideal is because it allows the number of matches that have to occur in an actual match between two schools, not practice. So you have 6 matches going on, they finish, 6 more come on, right? So if you stack those two, for instance, would be if one of those games went long, 2 of those games went long, and then they stacked, all of a sudden, if you're at a half hour, I mean, I think you're well within the 7 or 8 o'clock timeframe. Now, I don't think that that's gonna happen very often, but they would hate to cut a match off short in these match environments, especially when you have teams traveling from long distances. They have a large footprint of private high schools that travel all around. And so the school's super excited to be able to finally host matches. And so they want to be able to provide an avenue for the kids to come from Richmond or Lynchburg or Northern Virginia and complete the match while they're there.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I did receive a letter from a CAC member too, again, saying that, kids are going to bed in residential homes around that area at a certain time. So I don't believe we need 10 o'clock. We can discuss what the time is, but I'm not comfortable supporting that generous of a use. In fact, I think the kids should stop playing tennis at well before 10 PM. They have
Right.
homework to do, don't they? Anyway,
Well,
I'll leave it at that, but I'm not comfortable with 10 PM. I think that's too generous.
Well, I
for
can
the
speak
site.
for the applicant in
Sure.
that they're totally comfortable dropping it to 9 o'clock.
Anything else? No? Okay.
No.
Commissioner Missile?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Eric. Great presentation. Good
Yeah.
to see you. Couple questions, there's 3 under the lighting heading. So lighting controls, do you all have photo sensors or timers on those? Is that the plan so that if
So
people aren't
these,
there to actually turn them on and off, they'll go on?
Right.
So,
so these fixtures that we're proposing, they have that ability, but that is not the intent. The intent is to turn these on when they're needed, turn them off when they're done. They will
so
not be coming on a daily or any regular cycle.
So is it possible that someone may forget to turn them off, and would a timer at least maybe be helpful?
I'm sure that, yeah, that could be accommodated.
Great, because I think turning them on is not the hard part.
Yeah, there's
People get
gotta be
on
a
the-
built-in
the-
kill
pe-
switch.
People leave and they forget to turn them off.
Right. Understood.
I assume I think actually Ms. Ragsdale mentioned that you all had reviewed the updated staff conditions.
We did, yes.
And the one, you probably had about 5 minutes to do that?
Yeah, this is this afternoon's fun.
Yeah, the one that says 0 foot candles at the property line, is that able to be accommodated with your lighting plan? that
We
you
asked
showed
for
us?
de minimis. So the county code suggests that 0.5 foot candles at the boundary
Yeah.
is code requirement. My understanding is that that was put in place to protect the de minimis amount of light that could be coming from anywhere. I own a light meter myself. I don't know how many others in the audience can make that claim, but I've walked around with a light meter at night, just because this comes up. It
Yeah.
comes up a lot in parking lots and other situations. It's very hard to find 0.0.
Yeah.
So in our theoretical studies, which is what we do, right? This is what we put on our plans. We use software to project how much light will come out.
Hmm.
We think we can do it, but it's gonna be very, very challenging. We're gonna have to be very careful with the way we shield these lights, and we may actually have to put more screening in a few areas. So when we presented you this photometric plan, we discounted the landscape at the boundaries. So I don't know if anybody had a chance to take a look at the photometric plan.
I did, at least the one that I saw in the application was still at 1/2 a foot candle.
Right.
I mean, there were some areas that were 0, but there were some that were at 1/2 a foot candle.
Right.
So that's why I'm asking, is that the plan that you have in place? And if now you're going to 0, can you still achieve the 30-foot candles on the courts that you need to play the game?
Right.
I guess you haven't studied that yet because it's a brand new.
It's brand new. We haven't routed it. We think we can. I mean, theoretically, we think we can.
Yeah.
But I can say if we get down to 0.01,
Yeah.
right, that's not no, that's not 0. So
Okay,
that's why we asked for de minimis to be in the language and not 0.
okay, thank you. One last question on lighting. You guys are using the RSX1 fixtures,
Okay,
right?
right,
Thank you.
photovoltaics, yes.
And so we did have a lighting expert say those were really great fixtures and they're easy to control, and they recommend glare shields. You just said that you want to look at how you address glare and shielding, or maybe you
Right.
just said shielding, but what are your thoughts on that? Is that part of the built into the fixture, or?
So twofold. One, we looked at the elevation of the landscape that we're putting in at the boundaries in relationship to the top, to the profile, the top of the actual lighting unit itself.
Yeah,
And we're really close. And so, yes, we understand there is that zone of glare that can occur from straight
Mhm.
vertical in that first 10 degrees. We think that with the screening is gonna take care of about 80% of that. And the last little remainder, we're hoping that the glare shields will attenuate that.
got it. Okay, thanks. Switching quickly to buffer plantings, staff said, oh no, you said, I think in your presentation, that the images shown were to scale
Yes,
and that your intention is to plant them at that height. I didn't see anything included in the staff conditions that addressed height. Would you be open to putting something in there that did address that?
yes.
Okay.
We're open to
I
that.
figured you would. Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Fred.
And again, thank you for the presentation. It was very clear. And some things that I didn't quite appreciate the topographical challenges that you have in two directions. So a lot of my concerns have been already asked, the questions that I have, which have to do with lighting. How are you gonna mitigate that? I appreciate all the measurements that you have taken and the calculations. Also the schedule. Actually, one of the things that concerns me the most about that is that it seems like there was a different impression left with the CAC in terms of how long these matches would go. So it seemed like, 5:30 to 6 to then 10 o'clock, to me, that's a big jump. So I appreciate that you already said that 9 is, and I guess we'll have more conversations on that up here in the dais, I'm sure. So what I'm left with is parking and buffer from my concerns. So, and this is really a comment that maybe you can clarify for me. The drawing that we have on the screen here shows the path coming from the lower parking lot up and around the back of the courts, or the, where's your, so what is that, northwest side of the courts? And so so that path, right, that wraps around the
Yes.
the back, can you show the parking lot, back to the parking lot? The upper parking lot? Yeah. I'm assuming you're tying into that center court because of the handicap coming into to the center court, and then they would either go in one direction or the other, and there's ramps. Are those ramps? Is
Yes,
that
we
what
do
I'm
have
seeing there?
ramps. So these are great questions. So we're working with an architect who specializes in tennis courts, and he suggested 18-inch vertical separation between each battery is the ideal sight line for viewing tennis. We worked meticulously on the dimensions you see between these courts in order to provide ADA accessibility with ramps. You're correct. So each of these zones, so this is essentially level along each face. Each north face is level, and then it pitches towards the south at 1%. So this is easy, right? There's no problem with ADA accessibility through here. It's the 18-inch climbs between the two batteries. So not only will we want to provide accessibility for anyone to watch a match, not just from the baseline, but we also wanted to give them the ability to come between the courts, right? So yes, we have a ramp, a flat area, another ADA path for at least halfway. We can't provide an ADA pathway all the way to the end because the grade is dropping from north to south. So we do have to have a couple of treads of stairs there. And there's not really enough room to put ramps in this zone. But we will have ramps, like I said, from each. So from this flat zone, ramp up, and then it's flat again along this whole face. The same situation from here to here. You're ramping down, flat. This is all pitching 1%. Then ramping down, and then this is all flat.
And thank you, I appreciate that, because I figured there were some ramps there, and it was probably a lot more complex than I could see at that scale, certainly with my eyes. I'm just wondering the angle and the separate path that you're creating with the parking, and why can't that be combined with the path you're already creating on that northwest side of the courts? Because if you're able to do that, I think you can get more buffer. If you're able to shift the parking, it's kind of an awkward, I mean, I know this is probably not final, but it's kind of an awkward situation that you're creating with two paths. And it seems like actually, if you're in a wheelchair, there's a lot more that you will have to traverse. You gotta go in one direction, and if you're going back to the other court, then you gotta go back up and around. So it seems like if you can combine those paths, the parking access for handicap and the sidewalk that you're creating on the southern side of that, southeast side of that parking with a tennis court, it might provide you the opportunity to create more buffer and move the parking down. Does that?
Absolutely. No, it does. This is quote a concept plan, but this plan actually has been designed almost to its final state in terms of the level of actually engineering calculations we've put into this. So let me highlight a couple of little things for you. So this grade from here to here is falling at around 5 to 6%. We needed to get this down to this point, and the county has restrictions. So anywhere you have parking directly adjacent to the drive aisle, you cannot exceed 5% in any direction. So right there, that's a kind of a limiting factor. If we had more space right here, all through here, we would probably drop this even more. We would probably make this steeper through here and drop this down. And then I think we could achieve what you have talked about. Yeah, you see two sidewalks and you say, why can't they be one? Well, this is right here. This is a retaining wall along this edge. So this is a small knee wall. Right here. So that's about
Can't see your
30
cursor,
inches
but
tall.
it's-
Can't
Yes,
see
you-
it.
I'm sorry.
I
Oh,
can
I'm
see
sorry. Let me
the
put the
line.
pointer back on.
So that one path has a double line, the other two don't.
you go.
Yeah,
Right
that's your
here.
retaining wall.
That's a knee wall.
Gotcha.
So it's about, it's about perfect height for someone to sit and watch. But that's the grade change difference between this battery and this set of parking. We would have liked to have done just what you described. We played with this quite a bit, like I said. This grade, so just going back to, this is a retaining wall also. So we would love to get this retaining wall.
Right.
Less
So
height, so we would love to do all those things, but we couldn't achieve it.
I guess you're already going through, you're putting retaining walls, and I would think that there's a way of trying to create more buffer than that minimum, what is it, 15 feet? That you're
With 12
creating
feet.
12 feet,
Mhm.
so it's even less. It seems like, I know that there's some topographical challenges, but you're already doing retaining walls and both for the access for handicap and for creating that buffer. I would encourage you to look at this closer.
So we've looked at it quite a bit and we were happy to keep discussing it. So just to be clear, this section through here, we can give the buffer. It's only where our road driveway comes down. And so this is something that we had site meetings with the fire marshal's office. This design was not only the most efficient in terms of getting down, but it's also the exact orientation and length that the fire marshal was comfortable with. And so it's going to be difficult for us to shorten the driveway. But if we were to say, so if you look a little closer, right at the pinch point, you see that we barely got enough room to get a minimum width drive aisle through the existing parcel. And, one of the reasons why the parcel is what it is because of its history. In the old days, Stagecoach Road went right through here. And so this was the road. That's why the existing driveway is right on the northern boundary line, because this was the old Stagecoach Road. This went all the way to Lynchburg. But in the 1950s, it was moved to here.
And what's the dimension of your drive out now?
It's the minimum width, 20 feet.
You have it at 20.
It's 20 feet, yes. And that's not only county code, but the fire marshal will not accept anything less. Because they have to be able to get obviously their safety vehicles in.
Well, I do appreciate what you're dealing with here and how you're trying to navigate it. But you're still asking us to approve going from 20 to 12 from your buffer.
Understood.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we suggested, let's put something substantial in. You could have a larger width with maybe some smaller, younger pieces of vegetation. Or we could come in and say, hey, let's put the biggest magnolia. It's going to be evergreen. It's going to stay
Right.
screened all year.
And hope to survive when you're driving, right? As they grow, then the tree roots are gonna be underneath that road that you're gonna be driving over. So it creates a difficult situation for them. Anyway, I think Mr. Bivens has some other questions.
I do, but this is more interesting. So could you speak to a little bit about, so I'm gonna just go to a little macro issue here. If you could speak a little bit to what's the sports fields which are there, which is, could you just talk to me, how are they lit, if they are lit during the year? Or is this the only field? Is
This
the
would be the only facility
only- So the
lit.
football field is not lit.
That's correct,
The baseball field is not lit.
correct.
The other football field, soccer field is not lit.
That's correct.
Okay, so help me understand why this one has to be lit and those others don't, because we still play football here late in the afternoon. We play both footballs here at late in the afternoon, both the American one and the not American one.
Right. Well, okay, in an ideal world, the buses would get there on time, kids would
Right.
arrive when they're supposed to, and matches would be done, and everybody would be home by dinner time.
No, I'm not talking about tennis. Now
I'm sorry.
I'm leaving the tennis thing alone. My colleagues have certainly pushed the line. I'm wondering why this is the only field of which I would assume in your program, it's the one that's probably got the least amount of people showing up for it. Certainly if I look at your not your website, if I look at your website and see this kind of activities that you proclaim and the kinds of awards which you've won, this tennis is not the one which I would say would be driving your sports activities, your football team, certainly your basketball team, which is not being considered here, and some of your sort of ground sports, what I'm going to say ground sports. Those are the ones where you have a lot of energy, according to your website. Now, I can do this by going to your website. And so I wanted to know, well, since there's all this stuff around the website, why aren't those lit? Or are those lit? I don't know, since I'm not on that side of town. And if they're not lit, what is this special since all of those activities, the football games, the Friday night football, I assume you're playing Friday night football here. Friday afternoon football. Okay, Friday afternoon football, soccer, the other football, and then baseball, because baseball tends, unless you're playing afternoon baseball. All of those tend to have the same kinds of elements about them, early afternoon activities that may drive into the early evening. And so
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out if it was okay not to light those, why are we being driven to light these? And I'm also wondering if this is not a backdoor entrance into lighting all the athletic fields.
Right, so two good questions. So my understanding is that the tennis battery situation requires matches to occur stacked. So a football game is one game. You have one field, one game. Soccer team comes, they play one game and they're done. With tennis in this arrangement, unless you had 12 courts, you have to stack them. You have to have basically 2 games back to back. And that's why it takes longer than say some of these other sports. That's my understanding.
Okay, so if we're looking at stack to stack, because when I look at the rest of the courts around town, you're right, I don't have a problem with the number of courts. I thought I would. But you're right in amongst the high school courts around town. So, that I don't have an issue with that. What I'm just trying to figure out is if we can get to a yes on the light on lighting the tennis courts, are we then going to have to wrestle with at some point in time, lighting all your athletic fields?
Right, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't answer that question. So, all right, when we originally had our pre-application meeting with the county, we came in assuming that we would do one special permit for the new parcel they purchased, right? But because we're interconnecting the two uses with the shared use path and shared parking agreement that we're pursuing at the site plan level, then that, according to Sarah, I'm sorry, Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong. That's what forced us to go to a rezoning for the entire school and folding this parcel into the school. So what we're doing is we're giving you a special permit for everything, all sports, everything on the school parcel and the new parcel. So by special permit, this is the only one that's going to be allowed. If you want, if more lights were wanted sometime in the future, we're back.
You have to come back for that. Okay,
Right.
that's what I wanted to hear. And then the other piece that some of us, or at least I spoke to, is you owe, at one point, the school owned both of those pieces of property. You own the property that you're dealing with according to tax records, and you own the piece that was above it, and you sold the piece of the other piece. I'm struggling with, or I guess I'm pondering. And I'm not trying to do your site plan, but I'm pondering if you just share a little bit about why there. If you could just share a little bit about why there. How did you get to that place? Because you've got a lot of green property over there and you owned a bunch of property. The school owned property prior to settling on this piece. And so just to get a sense and out in the public about why that was the best place to put this.
Right. So I've learned a lot about tennis in the last year as well. I play recreationally, but I didn't really understand fully all the components. And one of the big components is sun angle. And it's rising in the east, setting in the west. The ideal alignment is, somewhere close to what we've got shown on this plan. So you can see the 3 batteries fits almost ideally within this parcel. Not only that, but the schools had a long-standing relationship with the previous owner. And they discussed the potential and what they needed and what they wanted for the future. And they had those discussions with the previous owner. Frank, please jump in if I say any of this incorrectly, because I wasn't involved in any of this part, but when they discussed this with the previous owner, she was very pleased to know that this was one day where the tennis courts would be.
And did they have a conversation with the, do you know what the engagement's been with the 4 different houses, the 4 other houses which are sort of around there?
Yes, the schools had conversations with all the.
So you've had deep conversations with all of them?
Several. Yes, yeah, we alerted them before we ever submitted. And we showed them concept plans. We've had a lot of interactions.
Okay. Sure, I'm good for now.
The beauty about going last, a lot of my questions have been asked, but I do have a couple. One's a follow-up to Commissioner Bivens, and knowing that the tennis matches are stacked, is there something that prevents them from starting earlier besides children missing a few hours of school? In college, you miss days of school when you play sports. So just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that to prevent the need for lighting.
Yeah, with Eric's correct, with the matches that take place, school ends about 3:30, 3:40. We want to try to do all of our, you were asking about football and baseball. We try to start everything around 4 o'clock when the matches. Practices might start a little bit more, but Eric is correct with tennis, in order to complete a high school match, and it's really about matches, not about practice. We would have maybe 8 home matches a year, 8 to 10 home matches in a season. Girls are in the fall, boys are in the spring. They're stacked. We would start matches at 4 o'clock. For us, we're right there, which is actually going to be helpful because we now have to travel to courts, and courts are becoming more difficult to rent because a lot of courts are being converted to pickleball. And we can't get courts. It's been very challenging. But another factor, and somebody had mentioned this, is I think Eric did, is that there are schools traveling from Virginia Beach, Richmond, Northern Virginia, Roanoke, Lynchburg. So it takes a while to get there. They're definitely leaving school early to get there. So the matches really across the VISA, our athletic conferences, matches start at 4 o'clock. You play a pro set of 8 games. A match will take 60 to 75 minutes. Maybe it can go a little longer. You have to stack them. You play 6 singles first, and then you go to doubles. So it's actually 3 matches, 3 doubles matches that play right after the singles. So if you stack those, typically the match will run till about 6:30. Where we run into an issue is, as Eric mentioned, is daylight savings time. Since it's not timed, it's about a 5-week period right at the end of October, early November with the girls tennis, where we don't want to get into a match and then have to stop at dark. Particularly with the girls, you're in playoffs at that point, and we were required to finish matches by VISTA standards for the playoffs. The boys, it's really beginning of the season. It's right at the end of February and into March, early March. I think March 10th is when daylight savings will kick in 2024. I looked that up earlier today. So it's about a 3-week period there where we want to make sure that we can finish matches. Commissioner Firehawk, I agree. We want the kids to go home. That's why we were talking about it earlier when Rebecca was emailing us earlier today and saying, hey, we can back that down to 9. We just want to make sure that we can meet that. Match goes long, you're at 7. Maybe one of the students is having trouble with a serve. The coach wants to stay around and hit a few serves. We just want to be able to do that and meet the requirements and the conditions. So that's
Very helpful explanation, but I just want to make sure I'm clear with my understanding.
Sure.
You have to start at 4. There's nothing, you can't start at 3 or anything.
Well, if we start at 3, then we're pulling our opponents away from school much earlier. So the guidance, it's not a rule that you have to do it, but we all the athletic directors agree. We want to start it at 4 o'clock. Is how we try to start.
Okay. Oh, so you had a follow-up question.
I'm still trying to get a handle on how many matches there are.
Mhm.
You said, and I don't mean like, I just want to know
Sure.
how many days of the year you'll be running matches at that site. Because I'm not as concerned
Yeah.
with kids practicing tennis after school as
Sure.
part of
I
their
understand.
tennis gym.
Yeah, let's say 20. I didn't go and count. I want to be cautious. But I think it's 8 to 10 home matches, and then we travel for the other matches. The only thing that could change that is with playoffs, but typically once we get to playoffs, we're going to Richmond, we're going to central facilities
Okay.
that all the schools can travel to. It's usually almost always in Richmond when you get to the playoffs. We might have a quarterfinal match, but
Right, but
So-
'cause to me, the whole concern about the lighting being on later is only happening when the matches are happening.
correct.
So therefore, if we put a limit of some type, 20 matches a year, 30, some number that would assure us that that even though there are impacts of light, spillage and maybe noise, and somebody's playing tennis till 9 at night, it's not that usual. That it's an unusual situation. It's only a handful.
And that's accurate. It's
of
an
days per
unusual,
year.
right? It's an unusual situation. We just want to make sure in those crossover periods when we're having matches that we can get completed with a match.
Right,
So
and
that's what we're
if
trying to
it's not
accomplish.
that often per year, if it's, I don't know what you said, 20 days a year, I don't really have a problem with that
Mhm.
particularly. I'm still wrestling with just the impact of just generally having tennis going on in what is essentially a couple of people's backyards. Because you do, by having that residential lot now turned into tennis facilities, you are now abutting two landowners who were not abutting a sports field before. And I'm also curious if you feel comfortable characterizing whether you think the residents all those homeowners that you said you spoke to, we didn't really hear what their reactions were. I mean, I know what I heard at the CAC, I know the expressions
Sure.
I saw, but I'm just curious if you are comfortable characterizing the residents' support or not support for this, the adjacent residents.
Yeah, as far as, so we met from the very beginning, once, Miss Morris, she passed away and, we purchased the property from her heir. The first thing we did before we did anything was we went and talked to the neighbors, the Brays, the Bickers, and, the Crawfords. And just explained to them what we are doing, what we would like to do, and they were involved. We've met with each of the Brays we met with 3 times, and the Bickers and the Crawfords we met with 6 times, just to every step of the way. That was my commitment to them personally, that we're going to involve you every step of the way. We want to talk through the pros, the cons, the issues, listen to you, and much of what we've done was based on their input. So where we finished with them, that they were comfortable with what they saw, but as far as their support or not, I don't know that that'd be appropriate for me to say that this, but I would say it's a very positive relationship with all 3. It's a very
Okay.
positive relationship.
I had a couple of more questions before we move on. I wanted you to talk a little bit about the amount of spectators. I saw, look at the plan shows 10 small benches.
Sure.
For 6
I've
sports.
been to, I think it was maybe Commissioner Bivens. I was calling Yeah. Keep rolling. But yeah, I've been to probably over the last 4 or 5 years, really the last 4 years, to probably half a dozen of our matches. They're lightly attended. It's pretty much local parents and a few grandparents, and that's it. Maybe 10, maybe 8, maybe 12. It's not a lot. It's not the most highly attended of the events. It's still important. It's very important to us. We have strong tennis programs with girls and boys, and it's an important part of our program. But it's lightly attended.
So the parents from the away team don't really travel.
You don't see really away parents traveling much. Maybe you'll see 2 or 3 there, 2 or 3 parents that travel,
Okay.
but not as much. Not as much.
And one final question is regarding condition 6. I think I typed it up correctly. It says tennis courts must not be used by other tennis organizations. And with your community service arm, if you will,
Mhm.
I want to make sure that doesn't preclude if, for example, the Southwood community had a tennis club and wanted to use those courts, that does not preclude them if the school so wanted to open up their doors to the community behind you.
We run, we have a long history partnership with Southwood. We run every summer, we run a soccer camp and bring the kids over. There may be, the courts are utilized for school activities. There may be a time in the summer where we do a daytime camp or clinic or something of that nature. We haven't done that before because we've never had those facilities. And I think Commissioner Moore was asking about opening it up. That was really opening up to the public was a direct response to the neighbors, the immediate neighbors, the Brays, the Bickers, and the Crawfords, and after the community advisory meeting. There was concern about it being put up on the Charlottesville USTA site that, hey, there's these great new courts of Covenant. Try them out. They're wonderful. And we were very concerned about traffic coming and going outside of school hours when we're not there and really not having control. And that was really out of respect to the neighbors. But there may be times when we haven't done that before because we didn't have facilities. So that certainly could be a possibility. We've done that before with soccer and with baseball.
I just want to make sure that language doesn't preclude you from doing that if the school still wanted to.
Yeah, I don't have it directly, but I think it has to be school activities or school events, but
Okay.
but we haven't done that, but it could.
It does.
It does.
The way it's written right now, it has to be amended.
Any final questions before we turn it over?
Questions?
Of course.
So the last question I had is, we've talked a lot about the lighting on the courts.
Mhm.
Is there other lighting on the site at all? Like, for example, for the parking or the access road?
So both the access drive coming in off of Hickory, that's lit,
Yeah,
and the parking lots are lit.
but
Yes.
not the tennis, not what you're proposing in terms of this site plan.
This site plan, yes, we are proposing one light fixture to light this area right here of the parking and the sidewalk.
It is on there? Okay, I missed that. I'm sorry. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we're going to finish the public hearing and then we'll take a 5-minute break. I have one person has signed up here in person. Forgive me if I mispronounced the name. Harold Timoney. Harold Timoney, would you like to come forth for your comment? You can share your name and general vicinity of your residence.
Yeah, I'm Harold Timoney. I live at 480 Stagecoach Road, which is across the street in one lot to the north and east. And I overlook the county parking lot, the police parking lot, which, by the way, is very quiet because the county police weren't allowed to use their sirens in that residential area. And I was surprised that this is not a rezoning request. And it turns out that private school athletic facilities by code are allowed by special use permit. And I would like you to reject that. And the main reason is the elephant in the room, noise. Mr. Willie cites in the application that tennis creates 58 decibels of sound. That refers to the noise of the ball on the racket. But it doesn't include the reaction of the players, the grunts, when they serve, or the reaction of the onlookers, which according to the internet goes up to 120 decibels. So I'm concerned that at whatever time in the morning, certainly it shouldn't be allowed at 7 a.m. They don't need it. It's ridiculous to think that people be out there playing at 7:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning. And at night, it seems to me 8 o'clock might be reasonable, but certainly not past that. Most people are getting ready for bed at that time. So I think that there should be some restrictions, not only in terms of hours, But of noise, I mean, what level should be allowed? And it turns out that athletic, noise from athletic facilities are exempt from the county code, as according to Ms. Stragdale. And I was surprised at that. This is not a good use for a residential property. This is R2. This should be houses, people, not extraordinary noise. And I ask each of you to think, how would you like to have a tennis court next to your house? You think that would be enjoyable? You think it would affect the value? If you were about to sell it and you had a buyer come and there's a lot of noise, people are yelling, you think it would affect the buyer's opinion of the worth of the property?
Okay, if I could ask you to wrap up. The red light that went off, if you can make your most pertinent point.
Also, I'm wondering how the rules would be enforced. Would the neighbors who have keys to the gate also be restricted in hours? And who would enforce that?
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the public that's here before us in person that would like to speak that has not signed up? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk, is there anyone online who would like to speak?
Isn't. No, sir, there isn't.
All right. With that, I'll turn it back over to the applicant if you want to make a response to what you've heard. No? Okay. With that, I'll close the public hearing. And with that, we'll also take a 7-minute recess. And so we'll report back here at 8:13. 8:14. And we'll bring it back into the commission. Listening to the conversation, I've jotted down a couple of topics for us to talk through, and we can always add more. I have the timing as one. So the timing that's in the staff report is one of the conditions. Of course, lighting, we spent a lot of time talking about that. Buffer, and I think noise also has a place in that as well. So those are the kind of 3 buckets that I've kind of heard simmer to the top. Is there anything else we want to talk through as we bring this to a conclusion?
Say a little bit more about the timing piece. I didn't.
In the staff report, I believe the condition is from 10 PM to 7 AM. Yes. And perhaps we can start there. I know some intel that we received from the applicant, they're willing to go down to 9, but I'd like for us to talk about what we think would be most appropriate in light of the design conditions that we see before us. So with that, I'll open up the floor. So. Mr. Murray?
Yeah, I can't imagine later than 8 or 8:30. I mean, you're talking about like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's like a 4-hour. That's a lot.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I would just also say that with the neighbors that are around, maybe different neighbors could come in over time. We don't know who will have children and who will not as well. So for me, I'm kind of keeping that in mind as I'm deliberating on what is the appropriate time limit. It doesn't feel like 10 o'clock to me.
Definitely not.
So.
On that note, I did, I have received, we did talk about the CIC again last week too, or this week, whenever we met last, a week ago. And the residents expressed, the members of the CIC expressed the same concerns as they had before. They don't want it lit at all. I would be comfortable with something like 8 AM to 8 PM as a window for that space to be lit. I think 4 hours is long enough. If you want to go to 8:30, I'm okay with that. But we also received another letter from CIC member that today, I think it was this morning, that said that they have small children and they usually put them to bed between 8 and 8:30. So that was some of the justification for why they don't want game matches. And there's, cars coming and going and people packing up, and it's not, it's just not just the game itself. It's cleaning up, leaving, all of that.
Just a couple thoughts. I'm sympathetic to the points you're making. My two colleagues. One thing that really resonated with me, and I've been around tennis my whole life, and also learned a lot recently about lighting of tennis courts. And what I have come to realize is that, and maybe this is just a sort of underscoring what the applicant said, that the real issue are the shoulder seasons, right? It's really late fall and early spring. So we're not talking necessarily about 12 months. We're talking about maybe a month at either end where there's daylight savings time issues. Other than that, I really feel like the lighting is gonna be minimal. The need for lighting is gonna be minimal. But I'm also sympathetic to those occasional matches that are very rare where they do push over. And there's really not a way for you to say, gosh, it's 8 o'clock. We have to call this match and end it. So it's rare. It's super rare. If this was like a municipal court where there were people playing and signing up right up to the last minute, I'd say that's a concern. My sense is that it's not going to be like that. What I would say though is that I would absolutely put in the conditions, the need to add timers to the lights so that if there's no one there, they shut off. And I would actually add those or light sensors to the 2 light fixtures in the parking area. So that, when you drive in, they come on if there's someone there. Otherwise, they're off as well. Just thinking about how to manage that. I think 9 o'clock is reasonable. I mean, if we don't want to go with 10, I would say 9 o'clock's reasonable. It gives a little bit of a buffer to the timeline for the school. And I think, again, it's probably going to be, I don't know if there'll ever be a time where the lights are on that late. So that's just my 2 cents about the lights.
I feel like that's a great segue. So it sounds like we're in that, between 8 and 9 o'clock range. Let's talk a little bit about the lighting a little more. I thought Commissioner Bivens brought up a good question. There are no other fields that are lit. So what brings attention to this? I think that's one side to it. I think the second side to it is how do we even feel like if there are lights about the condition that's been placed in the staff report that says there's no spillover technically, right? That's the minimus kind of language in there that says cut off at the boundary, right? So there's 2 points there. I'd love for us to have some discussion on to maybe try to bring this home. So. Have any initial thoughts and reactions?
I would support the term de minimis. I would support 0. I think that's next impossible.
It is next to impossible. I don't have a problem with de minimis. So, many of you know where I live. And so I live in a place that's got every single sports activity that could take place every moment, except for maybe the hottest days in the summer. And so I appreciate the comment about what does this do, but you hear the band, you hear football, I hear baseball, I hear soccer. And to me, that's just part of where I live.
But you knew that when you lived.
Actually, I did not know that when I lived there.
Did not
No,
know.
I did not. When I lived there. I did not, but I'm okay with it because I live near a high school. And anybody who's moving there lives near a school that's been there for a good amount of years now. So I do appreciate that. So I do think the de minimis, I support the de minimis, and I also support 9 o'clock because I also recognize this is not going to be every single day. This is going to be the odd days out. It's not going to be, and I find it interesting because so it's not going to be like the football field, which every Friday night, at least where I live, there are bright lights. There is lots of joyful noise, and it's just part of Friday nights. Friday nights in a small town, in a small community, and so. I'm okay with that because I also know, and this is what I was making my point about, while they have an emerging tennis team, tennis operation, it is nothing like the rest of their sports teams. It's nothing like it. And while they may hope that it's going to be one of their breakout programs, the reality is I don't believe it's gonna happen, because if we look at the rest of, I went and looked at the rest of the courts. And so a lot of the other high schools have something like, 7 courts, 8 courts, 4 courts. The one entity that has all the courts is, of course, the Boar's Head Inn, because of its nexus to the university, and it's got the stadium seating there. But other than that, the number of courts, while I was concerned at first, I'm not as concerned with the number of courts now, because I also believe that it's going to be one of their, I don't think it's going to be pushed in the way that I think other parts of that property is going to be pushed. Soccer, if you go there on an afternoon, you see lots of people trying to play soccer or training for soccer. And the same thing with football, and the same thing with basketball, both, not football for women, but both of those other sports with male, female components. So I like 9 o'clock. I like de minimis. As I mentioned before, I would have liked to seen it someplace else, but it's not someplace else. So I'm not gonna, not my role. That's not my role here to say that.
Fair. That's definitely fair. The other note I had was to add a condition about tree height for Commissioner Missile. I have that.
And also, Chair, Commissioner Carazana, I think made a really good point about as the trees mature, particularly if they're that close to the road, what's the impact on their lifespan? And I know Commissioner Fox talks about this often, about trees planting and how do you do that so you maximize their survival. And while magnolias are wonderful trees, they're not easy to get to 50 to 100 feet. It takes them a good 20 years to get to that height. And so while they're wonderful southern beauties, it's going to be a while before they provide the kind of buffering. And so I would hope that the applicant would look at different ways of doing effective buffering. Maybe it's with, wooden fences, and maybe it's with other trees that can be suggested by staff. But magnolia, I would not want them, let me put it this way. I would feel uncomfortable if the buffering solution are Virginia magnolias.
Want to weigh in, or I
Well,
know you're
yeah,
our
I was
expert.
gonna say, well, first of all, no Magnolia grandiflora is native Virginia, but that being aside, your point is well taken. There's also a trade-off. The larger tree you plant initially, the more you stunt that tree and stress it, so.
The survival rate is lower and it doesn't do as well.
Correct. And it also will, if you plant a tiny tree and a large tree at the same time, eventually that stress is so great that the small tree will outgrow the larger tree. So while it seems like planting a larger tree gets you something, it doesn't get you as much as you think you might think it does. I would say that if anything, in the green giant arborvitae, I've seen those things, they sprout up, they serve like instant satisfaction, to get your screening. But then eventually they kind of like die and they fall over and they do. Yeah. So, I would say as a temporary solution, if you're putting something like that in, that there should be something else behind it. That's going to be, fill in, I think there needs to be a more robust screening solution that takes into account the lifespan of that buffer. Not just provide some instant something.
Yeah, you might consider a layered buffer.
A layered buffer,
That you can
exactly.
get some bushy stuff to get started, and smaller trees that have more likelihood that they will survive to adulthood and thrive. Because if you take a tree that's been in pots with its roots bound, it's not going to do well. It'll look good for about 6 years, then it'll start to decline.
That's the point that I was trying to get to with my questioning about the parking and the access, because it just
Right.
seemed like, but I understand why they're getting there, given the topographical challenges. But it's that 12 foot, we're asking to reduce to 20 to 12, right? So that's part of what being asked in front of us here. It's minimal, and to try to get any kind of layered buffering, unless they make some agreement of planting on the neighbor's property, but I guess that's, that's not up to us, because but certainly conversations that can happen.
I mean, at least on the part that's not by the parking lot, you could definitely do more layering than it showed on that. You know, there's that other area, you know, the parking stops, then there's an area with a lot of white space there. You-
There is, but I think what we're missing is the topography, and that's why they're putting the retaining wall. There could definitely be, you know, more robust and interventional grading.
Well, the,
to
the more
get you where you need to
vegetation
be,
that
but-
they were able
right.
to put on site, even on slope, the more sound attenuation they're going to get. That's just a fact.
Well, so I
But
think that's
we
a
don't
really-
have a landscape plan really besides that one row of.
I think it's a really
arborvitae.
good point, that there is a
Yeah.
lot of trees are coming down. And what it's also opening up is opening up noise from the other sports.
Hmm.
Because right now there is a buffer there in that property serves as a buffer. But we're losing that buffer with these courts. So that, I believe right opposite that is the soccer fields.
Soccer and baseball.
So would
Again,
the,
which are
would the,
seasonal
would the
sports, which are
topography
seasonal
provide a
sports.
buffer though? I mean, it raises 30 feet or so, right? From where the lower fields are.
The topography does raise, yeah, about 30 feet. But it's all green now. It's all forested.
I'll add my thoughts to this too. You know, one of the things the applicant did mention was maybe the buffer, once you extend past the parking area, that they could,
man.
they could build that up a little bit more. There
Yeah.
could be some layered parking or layered buffer in that area. And if you look on the flip side, I don't know if this would work, but you look on the, what is that, the planned south side of the entrance road, before you get to the parking, there's a larger section right in there that you could potentially plant up. So depending on what you're actually buffering from, which is probably a little bit of everything, right? You could buffer from the courts there, you could buffer. So there's really the stretch of the actual parking spaces. That's the smaller buffer. The other thing is, I don't know if I can, maybe just a nod of the head, are you all putting screens on these courts? So the wind screens
That
are
would
gonna
help,
help
too.
with the radiant light too off the courts, and that
What is that? What's a
wind screens, they go on the chain link that help.
Like a
protect-
banner?
To keep the
It's
balls
a
from
big
blowing.
green, usually it's green, screen
A mesh.
that's
Oh.
like a mesh, a really tight mesh that prevents wind from affecting the ball play.
So it helps with sound.
Helps with sound
So
and
it
it
helps
helps
with
with
sound.
light.
The commissioners, where are we? I wish we had our cards or red, yellow and green cards.
Taking a
Oh.
tip from the.
One other addition I want to mention real quick.
Yeah.
I know, and this is just to, again, back to the condition number 6. With use of the tennis courts being limited to school activities. I just want to make sure that when it comes to access that the school would like to provide, say summer camps in partnership with Southwood Kids or other summer camps, that is, you know, written in, maybe that counts as school activities. I don't know.
That's,
Maybe language,
sorry.
school,
Yes.
when it's proper timing, I did want to kind of run through and clarify the intent of the conditions, but it's not intended to prevent the school itself from hosting tennis camps or clinics and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
but not to allow it to be leased for other
Gotcha.
tennis, other organizations, like, you know, we have a number of them in the community
Sure.
that run camps and are looking for facilities for their own separate programs, but I think that, you know, that's how we've interpreted school activities.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
I was thinking of the term school sponsored or school endorsed, or something like that.
I do have one question for
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
I thought the gentleman in the front row brought up, next to the front row, brought up a good point. How will if this is open to three adjacent properties by invitation of the school, who will police whether or not they're turning the lights off at a certain time and that they're obeying the rules? I don't know how you do that. But I mean,
Well, we do know that the lights are gonna go off if we can say somewhere between 8 and 9
Yeah.
at some point. So at some point, there just won't be any more lights.
yeah,
And so.
That's true.
That's true. And,
Yeah.
if the houses are close enough, I would hope maybe that's not my business, but I would hope the people would walk over to play tennis. So they wouldn't have to mess with the ballards or
good point.
anything like that. And so really what I saw that was is like, for the three houses which are there, and again, remember, this is an offer of which may only one may use it.
Yeah.
As opposed to all three of them using it. But for them, it's like, sure, you can please come, but we're not going to extend the lights just because you're my neighbor, you know, and theoretically, the lights wouldn't come on because there's no match.
Right.
So when the sun were to go down, it was my expectation when I read that is that during daylight hours, you can use it, but we're not going to necessarily turn the lights on for you to use it.
That's good, Brian. Okay, that's helpful.
It feels like we're kind of rallying around
We're moving as-
we're rallying around a yes, but there's certainly some conditions. It's yes and I'll just kind of recap my notes and you all can tell me if I'm incorrect. And Commissioner Missile, will you be making a motion?
Yeah, I'm writing down some
Okay.
conditions. too.
So going back to the time, we have the end time, let's say we've fluctuated between 8 and 9. It feels like there's consensus around 9. Or that was,
30? I don't see why it needs to go to 9. I didn't hear any compelling argument for that.
all right, I'll say 8:30 for the sake of this. How about in the morning? We never touched on that and I thought there was some reservation around 7 a.m. Is there a reservation around 7 a.m.?
I know our kids at school at
The kids are
7
at
a.m. I
school-
thought
school,
they.
you know, remember, those of us who played sports, remember, in order to play sports, particularly, I think this is high school here, you either had to come in early or you stayed late. And this is a small group of people. This is not gonna be 100, this is not gonna be 100 folks who are gonna be doing this.
All right,
I mean, so,
I don't disagree. I played sports growing up for sure.
I mean, you
so-
came, you,
I remember high school, no one wanted to play sports at 8. I don't know what high school you went to, but
Peninsula
there was
District.
no sport playing.
at your high
So-
school,
They
yeah,
were
it
all-
wasn't mine.
They were just
And it
trying
was
to
early.
drink Cokes in the student
Yeah,
union.
I don't have a problem with that.
So 7 to 8:30 is kind of what I'm hearing at the moment. A condition about tree height, adding layered screening beyond the parking lot and perhaps on the planned south side of the entry road. Adding timers to the lights that they shut off automatically, adding the word de minimis to the condition around spillover and lighting foot candles is what I have.
Good
So,
summary.
uh,
Yeah, I guess in
Commissioner
terms
Curzon?
in terms of the timing, I mean, I'm less inclined to go down to 8:30 just because again, this isn't happening every weekend or every, once a week that they're gonna go to that 9 o'clock time. But it does give that flexibility for that one match that just goes on. And not have to say, okay, now it's 8:30, we're shutting them off and beyond 8:30. The reality is, and Mr. Missile brought this up, is that you also need safe passage back to those cars. You have ramps, you have, there's steps and ramps and a number of, so we're gonna need lighting when people are leaving. Again, we're not gonna have 200 people there, but
I just thought after 4 hours, they would be done and going to their cars from everything I've read.
and I think that's probably true 99% of the time, but what about that 1 or 2 games that might go over? And it seems like 9 will definitely give them that buffer, so.
And the
anyway,
lights will
that's
go off if they're not playing.
And the light, or not even go on.
Right, or not even go
if
on.
There's no
right.
match.
Or if there's only on one court.
Is there some, were we clear on that? I'm just curious, I'm trying to understand that they would be turning, like the coaches there, like, let's say they're done at 7:30, then they're gonna turn it off. Or are they gonna wait for a timer that's just sitting there going and turning itself off at 9? Because there are sports fields in our county that are lit up and there's no game going on. They're just sitting there lit up. Not saying they're public schools, but they exist.
I don't know if we can say that the timer, the timer could go off well before 9. I mean, if there's no match.
Yeah,
the-
that's
the
what I'm
lights
hoping.
even-
I hope it's not a
do they
timer
even
that
want the
stays on
lights
till
on?
9 and they
Right.
leave at 8 and it's just
Well,
sitting there for no reason.
That might be getting into the weeds though. I mean, I think that'd be part of the lighting schematic.
Yeah,
or
we just
the
want
control
the
schematic.
lights to go off when the
So-
game is done.
I mean,
think we're-
I'm inclined toward 9 as well as Commissioner Carazana. The applicant was very comfortable with that. A number of us have said 9. It's a nice clean time. And again, we're talking about really probably fewer than 10 days a year where it actually is needed.
It's not gonna be covered.
All right, Commissioner Missile, I'll turn it to you.
Okay, let me try this out. So I'll, yes,
She wanted to say something. to
yeah,
us.
oh, sorry.
Oh, we were gonna put up the motion slide with these
Thank you.
edits for you.
And I do not have a copy of your most up-to-date those.
It
Yeah.
only exists in PowerPoint.
Sorry?
The 7th condition was just added to the PowerPoint this evening, so we didn't
Oh.
hand out written conditions.
Oh, so you've made edits to these already. Okay,
As she was listening to us.
look at that.
Go staff, go.
Okay, so let me see if there, let's just see how well you did. So I am gonna move, what's my language here? I recommend approval of SP 2023-1 with conditions as stated in the staff report and as amended as follows. So let's start with timers. You have that in there?
That's on 7. You'd want to put that on.
7
Yes, Caroline.
timers for preliminaries must be used. What'd you say?
I keep trying to
change
turn it
that.
off.
Planning between hours of 9 and 7. Okay, that looks good. Motion sensors on parking lot lights?
That's 7. That would be in 7.
I didn't pick up on motion sensors for parking lot lights.
I mean, at some point, I wouldn't think that neighbors would want 2 parking lot lights burning 24/7 or.
Okay.
The only challenge for
Right,
motion
that's
sensors
true.
is.
It needs to be
is
for the whole site,
Few animals that are on.
not just the courts.
Well, we've used,
Can.
yeah, we've used actually dimmers,
Yeah.
so they go down to like 20% of their brightness during the evening. And that's been effective. Not had a problem with animals. I think the sensors
Because
are,
it's so far up.
well, that, and I think the sensors are good,
Are
the
set up.
technology's
It's
good.
not like
that
at
is-
our home when the bear
Yeah.
goes by. When the bear goes by, all the lights come on.
Okay. That works.
Mhm.
Um. The light, okay, light levels of boundary are diminished, got that. Buffers on east and west of parking areas. What did you put in for buffer plantings?
I wasn't sure about y'all's consensus on that. We talked about, I'm not sure how you want to put it in your motion or if you want to put it in the condition.
That's fine.
It
that's
sounds like
fine.
you're strongly encouraging them to look for ways to increase the buffer areas.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Is that in here?
3.
3 is in there. I mean, basically said, so already asking them to.
Okay. Yeah, that works. 9 PM, 7 AM, got that. Tree height. Well, you got that
To
sort
deal
of
with the other
lighting.
way, with the other way.
Okay, that looks like you got it. So with conditions as outlined in the staff comments, I would make that amended, revised.
So is the motion then to recommend approval with the conditions as shown on the slide?
Yes.
Exactly what I was just about to say. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
No. Sorry, is there a second? I was eating. I'm sorry. Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Murray,
Aye.
Miss Firehawk,
Aye.
Mr. Claiborne,
Aye.
Mr. Missile,
Aye.
Mr. Carazana,
Aye.
Mr. Bivens.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move to the remainder of the agenda. Next is a review of the Board of Supervisors meeting from August the 16th. So I'll turn to staff for that report.
Thank you. Let me pull up my list of the August 16th meeting. The August 16th meeting, we brought the discussion of the community development department fee restructuring, which you all heard a work session on to the Board of Supervisors. They generally were happy with what was presented, similar to what you all saw. And so we'll be moving forward with those the fee restructure as you all saw it. It'll be coming back to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. And then in the public hearing section, we heard, or the board heard the Albemarle County Service Authority jurisdictional area amendment for Hunter's Way. You all, I don't believe you, that comes to the Planning Commission, but the jurisdictional area is the area that's services provided to through ACSA and RWSA. This was to expand it into an area on Hunter's Way, which is adjacent to 250, just to the east of town, to provide for fire suppression only. And that was recommended for approval. The final public hearing was the Park Road Manufactured Home Park project, if you all remember that one, out in Crozet, to add the additional 14 units to the existing mobile home park out there. Once again, the Planning Commission did approve that, and they included a lot of suggestions that were discussed here at the Planning Commission, such as the pedestrian path adjacent to the Park Avenue on the frontage there, and also included a recommendation, or included the requirement to satisfy the recreational requirements in there with at least one recreational requirement of their choosing. So those two moved forward. I'd also point out, I noticed at the last meeting, we got so tied up into our discussion on AC 44 that I did not give the update on what happened at the August 2nd board meeting. And so I just wanted to give you the quick update on that. That was the Community Christian Academy SP that had come to us, a very well supported here. No changes with the board. And then also the Miller School project, the Miller School SP and expansion. Once again, the board supported that project as well.
Right, thank you. Any questions for staff? All right, let's go to committee reports. Any committee reports to share?
Yes, we did have there's a Crozet CCAC. We did have someone come and talk about transportation, and got a lot of great feedback, and it was very interesting to hear, the community came very prepared with very detailed suggestions of improvements. And it looks like even some of those improvements may be happening sooner rather than later, because there's been some great discussions about traffic calming that could be happening. So it was very productive.
Great.
There was also a report about there's also discussion about the riparian buffer overlay district, reminding people to look at that policy in detail, that's going to be coming before us at some point, and to make sure they go and provide feedback on that.
Thanks for the heads up.
I just have one update. I'm kind of crossing the, oh, I'm sorry, Karen.
I just for the record, yes, the Fifth and Avon CIC met. I already told you that they talked about the other two proposals that we heard tonight, just because they were coming up. And they also talked about the long range transportation plan. So people just talked about just overarching desires. And then the county reminded everyone that that's open to the public on the county's website to comment on and have at it.
I'll just add one thing. I'm kind of crossing two roles here, but the US 250 Ivy Road project focus group kicked off yesterday. To talk about that area where the triangle about used to be. And I'm participating on that as, I guess, kind of an adjacent owner, but also reporting that to the commission. Hope that's okay to do both.
The only thing I will ask, since you're gonna be there, I will push again, because I continue to push on that St. Anne's, the lower school, does what it agreed to do when it got the SUP for the expansion. And that is to manage the traffic coming in and going out at those various times, so that there's not there's a word for that you all use. Stacking. So that there isn't the stacking on, I love these words. It's like these new sort of known, so there isn't, to minimize the stacking on the 250, because if anybody wants to see what it's like, just come try and get there during that period of time. And they were, my understanding from reading their SUP, that they were supposed to sort of actively engage in the moderation of their time, of their come and go times, to try and alleviate that.
The head of the school is actually part of this focus group too.
Yes, correct. Dr. Autumn Graves is on that corridor focus group.
So is that something that needs follow-up then? I would assume.
We have had discussions with them about ensuring that they are adhering to their conditions of approval for the SP, which includes, as Commissioner Bivens mentioned, staggering their times to help manage the traffic loads and stacking.
Stacking, my new word for today, stacking.
Commissioner Message, do you have anything else to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
Any other committee reports?
The hydraulic RIO has new leadership in it, and I'm afraid I don't know their names because I wasn't at it, but I do know we elected a new president, vice president, and the secretary decided to continue doing her job, and I'll get you those names, or you probably have those names. I don't need to get you. You have those names.
I should have mentioned also, sorry, that the CAC also noted we do have vacancies for both of our Scottsville, your district and my district, whatever they're called. I'm tired now. But we would love for having more citizens to step up and volunteer to serve.
I'll just do a quick report on the RIO CAC. I'm sure at some point soon we'll get the Home Depot Outdoor Garden Center proposal, which is proposed to the CAC. There's also a proposal to increase the density of zoning on a few acres parcel off of Berkmar, the sort of new sort of Berkmar Parkway looking thing, to increase the number of units that they can build. So I'm sure those will come our way at some point soon.
All right, didn't we already see the Home Depot?
No, we have not seen Home Depot yet. They need they are required to have a special use permit for their outdoor storage only. It's not necessary to build it, that they can build the Home Depot by right, but if they want to be allowed to have that outdoor storage, they need an SP.
They've never shown that they've never been here.
No, they've never been, because they don't have to come here except for that one piece. The department, in essence,
Yeah,
the
it's
department.
for the garden.
Outdoor storage is like what, like their garden center,
garden
that kind of
center,
stuff,
yeah.
yeah.
And tractors and things, like those houses that you can buy to put in the back of your property if the tree can fall over. But, no, but no, they don't, you did see presentation.
We're gonna move to the AC 44 update.
Thank you. Not much to report, since we were just with you a few weeks back for a really productive meeting. We will be going to the Board of Supervisors on September 6th, presenting that same information. As soon as we have the report, we will provide that to the Planning Commission so they're aware of what's going to them. Essentially, we have revised the recommendations for the three, based on the not the activity centers, but the other three items that we talked to you all about, based on your feedback. We've given explanations as to what we heard, as well as providing the minutes and a summary of all the Planning Commission comments at that meeting. All will be going to the board for their consideration on September 6th.
Well, thank you. And I'll just like to take just a few seconds. If you have any feedback about how we conducted that meeting, it was new, we did some new things. Brad and I, or Commissioner Missile and I, had heard some of that feedback, worked with staff and tried to implement some of that. Love to hear feedback, both positive or constructive criticism. Just as we have more work sessions, we'll know how to continue to curate them. So I'll just want to open the floor.
Oh, you want us to do it now?
If anything that comes to top of mind, so.
I certainly was pleased. I thought the conversation was a lot more sort of pointed, not pointed in a bad way, but it was more focused in a way that I probably wasn't expecting it to be. And so I was really pleased about that. And I also thought that the options that were presented from all of us as colleagues felt as if we'd been hearing each other talk about many of these things. There's more to do. There's sort of deeper diving to go on it. But I wasn't surprised. It was actually quite refreshing to me when I left to realize that we have been listening to each other and that there may be a place where some of us may fall away from a certain decision, which is fine. But that I didn't I didn't feel as if I was anticipating any significant cracks.
Okay, thank you. Any other feedback?
I would.
Sure.
No, it's pointing to you.
I would echo that. I mean, I think that it was a pretty full conversation, and I'm assuming that hopefully they got what they needed, the staff. But what I found interesting is that there were a lot of opinions. You know, it wasn't a monolith. There was a lot of opinions that were voiced and different concerns. And hopefully that's more representative of the community, because we don't have a monolith in this town. So in this community. And so I really appreciated that. Just the different voices and how we came at it from a slightly different. In general, I think there was some agreements, but we also definitely had some different viewpoints, which I certainly appreciate hearing those.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share any feedback?
I'll just say, I thought we did a good job with editing the recommendations and, you know, sometimes taking part of something staff said and another piece that we wanted to modify. So I felt very satisfied by that conversation.
Good.
There's more to come though, right?
Of course, yeah, and we're not done.
Yeah, that's not the only work
Okay.
session, I promise.
And there's more, and you'll give us an opportunity to sort of go deeper in what we.
Of course,
Okay, right.
yes, absolutely. We just want to make sure that we're on the right track in terms of how we kick that one off. So it sounds like in general, this general consensus that the approach is positive. So, okay. Did you want to say something?
Oh, just, I look forward to seeing how the conversation that we had is translated to the Board of Supervisors. Whether our amended questions get included and what that looks like. I think the success of that discussion all comes down to how's it presented to the Board of Supervisors. So I'm eager to see that.
Sure, point well taken, well taken. As we move on to old business, new business, I have a couple of things just for situational awareness, not so much discussion, but I just want to voice it publicly so it can appear on the agenda under this section, so you kind of keep tabs on it. One is, as we've been looking at different presentations to have, staff has locked in economic development for the October timeframe. So more details to come, but that will precede one of our work sessions that starts to dive into economic development. And then Mr. McDermott, you tell me if I'm misspeaking anything, but sounds like it's kind of accurate. So we'll have that in October, wrestle with it in a work session in November. And then the second piece is a joint work session with the City of Charlottesville Planning Commission. So that time will be worked out. So I know both staff teams are working with each other to see when that would be most appropriate, but wanted to flag those two things on the agenda so they can continue to appear and know that they're coming. And then lastly, so it was actually three things. At our next meeting, Fred and I'm sorry, Commissioner Missile and I.
It's after 9.
It is,
Fred.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Missile and I, we will both be out, not together, but out.
What are you doing?
It would be fun, it would be.
I would be okay if you were like that.
But I want to make sure that we do have a quorum. And so does anybody else?
Date?
The next meeting, so it'll be September 12th.
12th of September?
Yes.
Oh, I think it would be.
Yes,
I'm
12th
just
of
gonna
September.
release.
He's jealous.
It's Taco Tuesday.
I think you better close.
All
the
right,
meeting.
yeah, we're gonna wrap this thing up. So it sounds like everybody else will be here.
I'll be here.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have a quorum, so.
Yes, sir.
And you all will have to adopt a chairperson
All right.
at the beginning of that meeting. And so Mr. McDermott will walk you through that process on the day of. With that, is there anything else for the good of the order? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn until September 12th, 2023?
So moved.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,
Suppose you may remain here.
that's right.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
You sit on here.